My sister sobbed on Facebook that I was a greedy monster hiding our family estate. So I built a website exposing her fraud and let the judge do the rest. My mom threatened me. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "If you don't give your sister half the estate, you are dead to this family." I didn't raise my voice, I didn't flinch. I just calmly replied, "I guess losing some greedy, entitled relatives won't hurt me at all." I never thought money could instantly vaporize a family, but looking back, the rot was always there, festering just beneath the surface. It just took my grandfather's death to finally pull back the curtain and expose the absolute monsters I shared blood with. 7 months ago, my grandfather, Harrison Caldwell, passed away. He was an absolute titan of a man. He built his commercial HVAC and construction business in Chicago from literally nothing but a rusted metal toolbox, a beat-up 1988 Ford truck, and an unrelenting, bone-deep work ethic. He was a man of calloused hands, smelling perpetually of fresh pine sawdust, strong black coffee, and old motor oil. He taught me everything I know about absolute integrity, showing up on time, and doing the grueling job right, even when absolutely no one is watching. When I was just 14 years old, instead of letting me sleep in and play video games all summer, he started dragging me out of bed at 4:30 a.m. to take me to his active commercial job sites. He taught me the trade from the ground up. I spent years sweeping concrete floors, carrying heavy lumber, framing walls, hauling sheet metal ductwork, and eventually managing entire crews. By the time I turned 18, I was working full-time for his company while grinding through community college business and engineering classes at night. I didn't have a traditional, fun college experience. I had early morning sore muscles, dirt under my fingernails, and the quiet, unshakable pride of building a life with my own 2 hands. My younger sister, Sienna, who is now 25, took an entirely different path in life. Our mother, Martha, 54, always treated Sienna like a fragile, priceless piece of porcelain that desperately needed to be protected from the harsh realities of the working world. Sienna went to an outrageously expensive private university in Southern California. My parents took out massive, crippling loans to facilitate this lifestyle, and Sienna decided to study art history. She spent her college summers backpacking through Europe with her wealthy sorority friends, finding herself in Parisian cafes and Italian vineyards. She visited Grandpa Harrison maybe twice a year, and miraculously, those visits always perfectly aligned with holidays, birthdays, or the start of a new semester when she needed a little financial boost. I am not judging her choices, or at least I desperately tried not to for a very long time. We were just fundamentally different people living in entirely different realities. But the bomb dropped when Grandpa's will was formally read in his attorney's mahogany-lined office downtown. Grandpa left me his prized lake cabin in the Adirondacks in upstate New York. Now, you need to understand, this isn't just a dilapidated fishing shack. It is a stunning, sprawling, 4-bedroom custom-built timber cabin sitting on 12 pristine acres of dense, untouched forest with exclusive, private deepwater lake access. It was his ultimate masterpiece, appraised at approximately $1,150,000 in the current real estate market. To Sienna, he left $75,000 in liquid cash and his collection of vintage, fully restored Leica cameras that were appraised at roughly $40,000. The entire remainder of his substantial estate was systematically divided among various local charities and trade school scholarship funds he had passionately supported throughout his life. The will included a sealed, handwritten letter explaining his precise reasoning. For me, he wrote page after page about our shared memories of that cabin. He wrote about teaching me to fish off the very cedar dock we spent an entire summer rebuilding together when I was 16. He wrote about my first clumsy attempts at carpentry on the massive wraparound back porch. His exact words were, "I want this property to stay firmly in the hands of someone who understands its true bleeding value beyond a dollar sign. A house is just wood and stone until you pour your sweat into it." Caleb knows the sweat. For Sienna, his letter was much shorter, but still kind. He mentioned being proud of her artistic passions and explicitly stated he hoped the $75,000 cash injection would help her finally establish her career and wipe out some of her crushing debts. My mother, Martha, went absolutely nuclear. She didn't just disagree with the will, she launched a holy crusade. She started calling me 4, sometimes 5 times a day. Her voice was shrill and demanding, insisting that generational family wealth must inherently benefit all children equally, completely regardless of what the person who actually earned the money intended. She aggressively argued that Grandpa Harrison was a toxic, old-fashioned misogynist who played favorites simply because I am male and chose to work in the dirt and mud like him. She demanded, not asked, demanded that I immediately list the Adirondack cabin for sale and split the $1,150,000 proceeds right down the middle with Sienna. Here is where my initial guilt and deep internal conflict came in. I genuinely loved my sister. Despite our massive differences, we had always maintained a close, if superficial, relationship. Sienna herself hadn't directly screamed at me for the money yet, But she had started making extremely passive-aggressive, calculated comments. She'd sigh loudly at family dinners, mentioning how incredibly lucky I was, and how a massive cash windfall from the house could literally solve every single problem in her life. She is currently drowning in about $92,000 of combined student loans and high-interest credit card debt from her lavish lifestyle. My mother then decided to weaponize the extended family. At a tense Sunday dinner, my aunt pointed her fork at me and called me a selfish, greedy opportunist. My uncle loudly proclaimed I was spitting on traditional family values. They created a toxic echo chamber, all aggressively chanting that Grandpa would have wanted us to take care of each other and that keeping the entire property made me a monster. But the absolute truth is, I don't want to sell it, period. Beyond the immense, crushing sentimental value, my wife Elena and I have been desperately trying to plan for our future. We want to start a family. We dream of our future children spending their humid July afternoons jumping off that exact same cedar dock just like I did. Currently, Elena and I live in a cramped, noisy 2-bedroom apartment in Chicago. This Adirondack property represents a future, a sanctuary that we could never, ever afford to purchase on our own. My mother's latest shifting argument is that I already have a highly stable, lucrative career. I successfully run my own mid-sized commercial HVAC and construction firm now. Meanwhile, Sienna is 25 and still struggling to find her true path. She works a meager 15 hours a week at a boutique art gallery and occasionally writes freelance blog posts that pay absolute pennies. Martha says it is my biological duty as the older, successful brother to even out the scales of the universe. I desperately tried to offer olive branches. I told Sienna she could use the cabin absolutely whenever she wanted for free vacations. I offered to personally pay for her flights out there. I told her she could have her future wedding on the property entirely free of charge. I even offered to dip into my own personal savings to help her aggressively tackle the high-interest portion of her credit card debt, but Martha shut it down instantly. She told me my offers were insulting, pathetic crumbs. She formally demanded I either sell the property and give Sienna $575,000, or I personally take out a massive mortgage and buy Sienna out for $575,000 cash. Reddit, Aita for refusing to sell my grandfather's cabin even though it undeniably created a massively unequal inheritance split between my sister and me? Edit, to clarify some recurring questions in the comments. Yes, the will was absolutely 100% properly executed with impartial witnesses and a high-end estate lawyer. Grandpa Harrison was thoroughly evaluated by his primary care physician and a geriatric specialist just 2 months before finalizing the will specifically to prevent my mother from trying to challenge it. The deed to the house has already been legally, fully transferred into my name. I hold the title insurance. I am not worried about the legal mechanics. I am just mourning the total destruction of my family. Update 1. Well, everything escalated with terrifying speed. First, thank you to every single person who responded to my original post. The overwhelming consensus was that I was NTA and that I needed to honor my grandfather's dying wishes without guilt. I felt deeply validated reading your comments, but a naive, stupid part of me was still desperately hoping to find a peaceful, loving resolution with my family. That hope was violently murdered this past weekend. Let me back up. After my original post, I sat down and had a very long, seemingly emotional FaceTime conversation with Sienna. She cried a little, admitted she was deeply hurt by the disparity of the will, but explicitly stated she understood Grandpa's reasoning. We virtually hugged it out. I reiterated every single one of my previous offers: free vacations, the wedding venue, helping with the debt, and I even added that when she was finally ready to buy a starter condo, I would personally gift her $15,000 toward her down payment. She seemed genuinely, profoundly grateful. I thought the war was over. My mother, however, strapped on her armor and doubled down. She created a toxic family group chat, literally titled Fairness for Sienna. She spent her days flooding this chat with passive-aggressive psychology articles about how inheritance inequality breeds resentment and destroys sibling bonds. I quietly muted the chat for my own sanity, but my wife Elena would occasionally check it and show me the most deranged highlights. Martha was methodically building a narrative that I was a manipulative, calculating sociopath who had spent years slowly poisoning a sick old man's mind against his own sweet granddaughter. Then last Thursday, Sienna called me. She was practically vibrating with excitement. Her boyfriend of 3 years, Julian, had finally proposed. I was genuinely thrilled for her. I immediately reminded her of my offer. The Adirondack cabin was completely hers to use for the wedding. She squealed with joy, thanking me profusely, and immediately started rambling about planning a rustic, elegant lakeside summer wedding for next June. Fast forward to Sunday morning, Elena and I packed up our truck and drove the long hours out to the cabin for a long weekend. The property desperately needed maintenance. Grandpa had been severely ill for the last 2 years of his life, and the harsh winters had neglected the exterior. We pulled into the long gravel driveway and immediately hit the brakes. There were 3 unfamiliar cars parked on my property. One was Sienna's SUV, one was Julian's sedan, and the third was a massive, pristine white Sprinter van with pink cursive lettering on the side. Lakeside luxury events. Feeling a heavy knot of dread in my stomach, Elena and I walked through the front door. We found Sienna standing in the center of the main living room, gesturing wildly while showing a woman with a clipboard around my house like she was the sole proprietor. They were actively discussing knocking down walls. "If we just remove this entire load-bearing wall here," Sienna was saying, pointing to the exact timber wall Grandpa and I had spent 3 weeks framing and reinforcing, "it will really open up the flow for the cocktail hour. And obviously, this dated, ugly kitchen has to be completely gutted before the caterers can use it." The wedding planner was nodding enthusiastically, snapping photos on her iPad and taking laser measurements of my ceilings. I cleared my throat loudly. "What exactly is happening here?" Sienna spun around, beaming a completely fake, plastic smile. "Caleb, perfect timing. I'm just getting a head start on planning the big day at our family cabin." Notice the pronoun, our. The wedding planner eagerly stepped forward, handing me a glossy business card. "You must be the brother. I am so incredibly excited to transform this hidden, outdated gem into a premium luxury venue for Sienna." I felt my blood pressure spike. I pulled Sienna roughly into the hallway, away from the planner. "Sienna, what the hell are you doing? I offered to let you host your wedding here. I didn't offer to let you demolish my house. This is my property, not a shared family asset." Sienna's fake smile vanished instantly, replaced by an eye roll so hard I thought she'd sprained something. "Oh, come on, Caleb. Stop being so dramatic. We both know Mom is completely right. This place should legally belong to both of us. You owe me this. I'm just planning my wedding at my family's estate." That is the exact moment Elena tapped me on the shoulder and silently held up her phone. She was showing me Sienna's Instagram page. Sienna had posted a photo of the cabin 45 minutes prior. The caption read, "Can't wait to marry my soulmate at our family's sprawling historic lake property. Number cabin wedding, number family estate, number generational wealth, number blessed." I saw red. I turned to Sienna, my voice dangerously calm. "Everyone needs to pack their things and leave my property right now." Sienna immediately burst into theatrical, heaving sobs. She started screaming that I was an abusive monster ruining her engagement joy, that I was being a controlling tyrant over a house I didn't even pay a single dime for. Julian came rushing out of the kitchen, trying to play the mediator. He held his hands up, saying, "Whoa, guys, let's just all calm down and discuss these renovations like a family." The wedding planner, realizing she had walked into a radioactive family war zone, looked absolutely mortified. She gathered her equipment, mumbled an apology, and practically sprinted to her van. Sienna, sobbing hysterically, pulled out her phone and called Martha. Our mother lives over an hour away from the cabin, but she somehow pulled into the driveway in 40 minutes. She must have been doing 90 down the interstate. Martha threw the front door open, marching in like a conquering general. She didn't even look at Elena. She immediately cornered me and started viciously berating me for emotionally traumatizing Sienna on what was supposed to be the most magical planning day of her life. The argument that followed was the ugliest thing I have ever experienced. Martha screamed that Grandpa Harrison's brain was rotting from dementia when he wrote the will. Sienna shrieked that I had systematically isolated and manipulated a vulnerable, dying old man just to steal her half of the money. Martha threatened to hire a pitbull lawyer and contest the will to drag me through the mud. Sienna dropped to the floor, sobbing that I was maliciously stealing her dream wedding venue just to watch her suffer. But the absolute breaking point, the moment the bridge burned forever, was when my mother pointed a manicured finger at my wife. "And you?" Martha spat at Elena. "You're nothing but a pathetic little gold digger who finally hit the jackpot, manipulating my son into stealing from his own flesh and blood." I lost my mind. Elena grew up bouncing between abusive foster homes. She worked 3 grueling, back-breaking jobs, simultaneously just to put herself through nursing school. She is a pediatric nurse who saves children's lives. She has never asked me for a single penny. In fact, when we got engaged, Elena was the one who insisted we sign a strict prenuptial agreement just to completely prove to my family that she wasn't marrying me for my business assets. I stepped between my mother and my wife, pointing at the open front door. "Get out. Get off my property right now, or I am calling the county sheriff and having you all arrested and charged with criminal trespassing." Sienna screamed that I couldn't legally ban her from her own rightful inheritance. Martha told me, her voice dripping with venom, that I was dead to her unless I immediately signed over half the deed. They finally left, tires spinning angrily in the gravel, but not before Sienna sat in the passenger seat of Julian's car and recorded a tearful, devastated video for Facebook. She cried into the camera about how her cruel, greedy millionaire brother was aggressively gatekeeping the family estate and actively trying to ruin her wedding out of pure spite. By the time the sun went down, the post had gone completely viral within our extended family network. My phone practically melted from the notifications. I received dozens of furious text messages from aunts, uncles, and cousins calling me heartless, a sociopath, and a disgrace to Grandpa Harrison's legacy. Elena and I spent the rest of the weekend in absolute, heavy silence. We patched the rotting wood on the dock, the rhythmic sound of the hammer being the only thing keeping me sane. Later that night, I found myself standing in the living room, staring at a framed photo of Grandpa Harrison, quietly apologizing to him for the disgusting circus his beautiful sanctuary had become. I have officially, in writing, revoked my offer to host Sienna's wedding. I called a local security firm and spent $2,500 having high-end, motion sensor security cameras installed around the entire perimeter. I completely changed all the heavy deadbolt locks because I discovered Sienna had secretly made unauthorized copies of the spare key years ago. My best friend, who is a corporate attorney, told me to start a physical binder and document every single interaction, text, and threat, because people like this always escalate. The Fairness for Sienna group chat has become a war room. Cousins I haven't spoken to in a decade are writing paragraphs about my lack of morality. However, my dad, who divorced Martha 12 years ago specifically because of her toxic, narcissistic behavior, sent me a private text. It read, "I am so damn proud of you for standing your ground, Caleb. Harrison would be too. Don't give them an inch." That text broke me. I sat on the floor of the bedroom and sobbed. I love my sister, but the person who stood in my living room demanding to tear down my grandfather's walls is a stranger. My mother has always been controlling, but this level of psychotic manipulation is entirely new territory. I am starting to realize I never actually knew the people I grew up with. Update 2. I genuinely never thought I would be back on this forum with another update. I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. The situation mutated into a nightmare beyond anything my brain could have possibly comprehended. Grab a drink, because this is going to be a very long, very dark ride. Following the overwhelming advice from Reddit and my attorney friend, I went extremely low contact with Martha and Sienna. I didn't block their numbers. I needed to monitor their crazy, but I heavily restricted their access to all my social media and only responded to logistical emergencies. For about 3 blissful weeks, the silence was golden. I should have known the silence meant they were plotting. It started innocently enough with a thick, certified letter arriving at my office. It wasn't a lawsuit yet. It was a formal, aggressive legal request for binding mediation to resolve the unfair and fraudulent distribution of the Caldwell estate. The letter, drafted by some strip mall lawyer they found, outlined a completely fabricated narrative. It claimed my grandfather was heavily medicated, suffering from severe cognitive decline, and that I exerted undue coercive influence over him. It demanded equal treatment for the grandchildren. I immediately forwarded the letter to the powerhouse estate attorney who originally handled Grandpa's will. He called me 10 minutes later. He actually laughed out loud on the phone. He told me it was the most pathetic, legally baseless fishing expedition he had seen in his 30-year career. He then, proudly laid out the absolute armor Grandpa had built for me. Grandpa's file didn't just have a will. It contained a comprehensive psychiatric medical evaluation conducted by an independent specialist exactly 48 hours before the will was signed, definitively legally confirming his total mental competency. It contained a 4K high-definition video recording of Grandpa sitting in the office, looking straight into the camera, calmly and rationally explaining exactly why he was leaving the cabin to me and the cash to Sienna. It contained signed, sworn affidavits from 2 independent witnesses, his primary doctor, and his CPA, all confirming zero undue influence. My lawyer told me Martha and Sienna were just rattling sabers, desperately hoping I would be terrified of public family drama and just hand over a massive settlement check to make them go away. He was right about the motive, but wrong about how far they would go. 2 days after I ignored the mediation letter, Sienna physically ambushed me at my commercial HVAC office. She showed up with Julian and a brand new, sleazy-looking lawyer. But it was Sienna's appearance that shocked me. She was wearing what I can only describe as a meticulously crafted sympathy costume. My sister, who refuses to check the mail without full contour makeup and designer clothes, showed up wearing no makeup, her hair deliberately messy and unwashed, wearing an oversized, wrinkled, faded sweater. She looked like she was auditioning for a Sarah McLachlan commercial. Her new lawyer handed me a thick, bound document. They weren't just asking for half the cabin's value anymore. They had completely lost their minds. The document was an itemized list of psychotic demands. 1. 50% of the newly appraised cabin value. $575,000. 2. Emotional distress damages for being forcibly excluded from the family property, $100,000. 3. Reimbursement for her suddenly ruined wedding venue deposits and emergency venue changes, $75,000. 4. Total coverage of Sienna's massive student loan debt, claiming I only avoided debt because I got the unfair educational advantage of working for Grandpa, $100,000. Total demand, $850,000. I stared at the paper. I looked at the lawyer. I looked at Sienna's fake tragic face, and I burst out laughing. I couldn't stop. It was so absurd it became pure comedy. This was apparently the wrong response. Sienna immediately started hyperventilating, bursting into loud, theatrical wails about how I was a sadist who enjoyed watching her starve. Julian wrapped his arms around her, shooting me a glare of pure, unadulterated hatred. The lawyer leaned forward and used his slimy voice. Mr. Caldwell, this is an incredibly generous compromise offer to avoid a very long, very messy, very public trial that will destroy your business reputation. I stopped laughing. I stood up, opened my office door, and said, "Get out of my building before I have you all trespassed." Sienna's hyperventilating tears miraculously vanished in less than a second. Her face hardened into a mask of pure malice. She walked past me and hissed directly into my ear, "You're going to deeply regret this, Caleb. Mom was right. You're a monster." The mask had fully slipped. That evening, I discovered exactly what her revenge looked like. Sienna had launched a GoFundMe campaign titled, "Help Me Fight for My Dying Grandfather's Stolen Legacy." The campaign description was an absolute masterclass in sociopathic manipulation. I have it memorized. It read, "My name is Sienna Caldwell, and I am shattered to share my nightmare. When my beloved grandfather passed away, my family made a horrifying discovery. In his final confused months, he supposedly left our family's historic generational cabin, worth over $1 million, solely to my older brother. This was a devastating shock, as Grandpa always promised the estate would be a shared sanctuary for our future children. I firmly believe my grandfather was heavily pressured and manipulated in his final vulnerable days. My brother, who controlled Grandpa's business, isolated him while I was away at college pursuing the education Grandpa always dreamed I would get. Now I am drowning in crippling student debt, facing the cancellation of my wedding, while my brother hoards $1 million luxury estate. All I desperately want is fairness. I want to buy a modest home, pay off my education, and honor what I know in my soul were my grandfather's true dying wishes. Please help me raise funds for the legal fees to fight this elder abuse and secure justice for my family." She set the legal fee goal at $75,000. Within 48 hours, she had raised over $11,000. It was mostly from distant extended family members, old high school friends, and community members who only knew her manufactured, cheerful side of the story. The comments on the donation page made me physically sick. Caleb should be locked in a cage. Greedy toxic men always try to violently push women out of generational wealth. Elder abuse is a horrific crime. I hope you put him in prison, Sienna. Against my lawyer's strict advice, the sheer injustice of it made me snap. I created an account and posted a single, highly detailed comment on the GoFundMe. Fact 1. The will is legally ironclad and supported by independent psychiatric medical evaluations proving full competency. Fact 2. Sienna received $75,000 in liquid cash and $40,000 in vintage valuables. Fact 3. I offered Sienna free unlimited use of the house and offered to pay for her wedding. Fact 4. The inheritance differences reflect the fact that I spent 10 years physically working for his company while Sienna visited twice a year. Stop scamming people. My comment was deleted by the campaign organizer, Sienna, in exactly 3 minutes, and she instantly blocked my IP address from commenting again. Then came the coordinated social media carpet bombing. Sienna started posting highly edited, nostalgic throwback photos of her sitting on Grandpa's lap when she was 6 years old with captions like, "I miss your light every single day, Papa. I promise I won't let him destroy what you built." Noticeably, she couldn't post any photos from the last 10 years because she was literally never around to take any. Martha mobilized her army of bored, middle-aged suburban friends. She started posting massive Facebook essays about the patriarchal sickness of inheritance inequality and how families protect male abusers. Local mommy bloggers and micro-influencers started sharing it. The real-world pressure became suffocating. My commercial HVAC company's Google and Yelp pages were suddenly review-bombed with hundreds of fake one-star reviews calling me a thief, a misogynist, and an elder abuser. But the line they crossed that meant total war was when they targeted Elena. Last Wednesday, someone we suspect Martha walked into the massive city hospital where Elena works as a pediatric nurse. They left 60 printed flyers of Sienna's GoFundMe page scattered across the nurses' breakroom tables, the cafeteria, and taped to bathroom mirrors. Scrawled across the top in thick red marker were the words, "Is this the monster your coworker Elena is married to?" Elena called me from a supply closet, sobbing hysterically. Several of her coworkers had started treating her with cold suspicion. One senior nurse actually pulled her aside and asked, completely seriously, if Elena felt guilty wearing scrubs while living off stolen elder money. That Friday, desperately needing an escape from the psychological torture, Elena and I drove up to the Adirondack cabin. As we turned onto the dirt road leading to our driveway, my headlights illuminated something that made my blood freeze. Stabbed deep into the front lawn was a massive, "Professional Real Estate, For Sale" sign. I slammed the truck into park and sprinted toward the house. There was a strange SUV in the driveway. I unlocked the front door to find a local real estate agent standing in my kitchen, showing the property to a wealthy-looking older couple. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" I roared. The agent looked terrified. "Excuse me, I'm showing the property." The owner, Sienna Caldwell, signed an agreement with my brokerage yesterday to aggressively fast-track the sale. Sienna had forged my grandfather's old stationery, pretended the house was still in probate, and authorized a listing. I had to pull up the county tax records on my phone, show my physical ID, and explicitly threaten the agent with a massive lawsuit for breaking and entering before they finally scrambled out the door. That night, Elena and I sat on the edge of the wooden dock, our feet dangling over the black water. I was shaking with pure, unadulterated rage. I realized I couldn't just defend myself anymore. I had to utterly destroy their narrative. I went up to the attic to search for old property blueprints. Instead, I found a dusty, heavy cardboard box tucked behind the thick insulation. Inside were Grandpa Harrison's journals. He had kept meticulous daily diaries for 40 years. I sat on the floor with a flashlight and began reading. The entries regarding Sienna weren't just sad, they were a damning, chronological record of her lifelong selfishness. I digitized every single page. The 14th of August 2019, Sienna's 21st birthday today. Sent her a card and a $1,500 check. She cashed it by 2 p.m. No phone call to say thank you. Beginning to think she only sees me as an ATM. The 4th of July 2021, invited Sienna up to the cabin for the weekend. Told her I wasn't feeling well and would love the company. She texted saying she was too busy with summer classes. An hour later, Caleb showed me her Instagram. She's at a massive beach house party in Cabo drinking champagne. My heart hurts. The 3rd of March 2024, 2 months before he died. Met with the estate lawyer today, finalized the will. The lawyer asked if I was sure about limiting Sienna to cash. I am. She doesn't love the cabin. She loves what she can sell it for. The cabin must go to someone who sees it as a home, not a bank account. Caleb has earned this 10 times over. That final entry was dated during the exact window Martha publicly claimed he was suffering from extreme dementia. I met with my ruthless new litigation attorney the next morning. I was completely done trying to preserve a relationship with vampires who only see dollar signs where memories should be. The day after my meeting, my litigation attorney and I went on the offensive. We drafted a massive, terrifyingly comprehensive cease and desist letter, and had it served simultaneously to both Sienna and Martha via process servers at their respective homes. The legal document exhaustively detailed their crimes: severe defamation of character, tortious interference with my business, wire fraud, the GoFundMe, attempted real estate fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress regarding Elena's hospital. We demanded the absolute immediate cessation of all posts, a complete takedown of the GoFundMe with mandatory refunds, a public retraction, and zero further contact. Sienna's response came exactly 48 hours later. She didn't hire a lawyer, she didn't back down. Instead, she set up her ring light, sat on the floor of her expensive apartment surrounded by crumpled tissues, and went live on Facebook. She sobbed hysterically to her viewers about how her abusive millionaire brother was now using his massive wealth to legally terrorize and silence her. She literally compared herself to David fighting Goliath. What Sienna, in her infinite narcissism, failed to realize was that by taking the fight completely public and continuing to defame me after a legal warning, she made every single piece of private evidence fair game. My lawyer had explicitly warned them. They called our bluff. We didn't bluff. Within 24 hours, my attorney and I launched a beautifully designed, SEO-optimized public website titled, thetruthAbouttheCaldwellEstate.com. We didn't use hyperbole. We just posted raw, undeniable data. We posted the full unredacted will, including Grandpa's deeply emotional letter. We posted the certified medical competency evaluation, signed by 2 doctors. We embedded the 4K video of Grandpa Harrison, calmly explaining exactly why Sienna was only getting cash because she treats family like a bank. We posted high-res scans of Grandpa's private journals, highlighting the exact dates Sienna lied to him to extract money while partying. We posted the official probate accounting showing Sienna had already received $75,000 in liquid cash and $40,000 in assets. We posted a brutal side-by-side collage, screenshots of Sienna's GoFundMe claiming she was starving and drowning in debt, placed right next to screenshots from her public Instagram showing her buying designer bags, eating at Michelin-star restaurants, and taking luxury vacations during that exact same time frame. But the absolute killshot, the piece of evidence that ended her entire life, was a series of text messages we legally obtained via subpoena during the initial discovery phase of her threatened lawsuit. It was a text thread between Sienna and her best friend, sent the night after she ambushed my office. Sienna, once I get Caleb to legally crack under the public pressure, I'm buying that penthouse condo downtown. Mom says if we just keep making his wife's life a living hell at the hospital, he'll pay us the $850,000 just to make it go away. Friend, Is the GoFundMe actually working? Sienna, it's genius. I've already pulled in $11K from these gullible idiots. Even if we don't win the lawsuit, I'll have enough cash for a new Porsche down payment. These morons actually believe I gave a shit about the old man or that dusty, mosquito-infested cabin. We blasted the link to the website to every single family member, every donor on the GoFundMe, every local news outlet, and every person who had left a fake review on my business page. The backlash was apocalyptic. The GoFundMe Trust and Safety Team immediately launched a fraud investigation, permanently banned Sienna's IP address, and forcibly refunded over $22,000 to the donors. Several extended family members called me weeping and apologizing, saying they had been completely blinded by her manipulative tears. But Martha, completely divorced from reality, doubled down. She officially filed the lawsuit contesting the will, citing undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. She hired an outrageously expensive, aggressive trial lawyer on contingency. The probate trial happened last month. It lasted exactly 3 days. Martha's lawyer tried to paint me as a calculating mastermind. They actually paid a medical expert psychologist who had literally never met my grandfather to testify about theoretical invisible cognitive decline. Our defense was a surgical strike of pure facts. Grandpa's actual treating physician testified under oath about his razor-sharp mental acuity. And then we played the video of Grandpa Harrison in the courtroom. The entire courtroom sat in dead silence as my grandfather's booming, steady voice echoed off the walls. I am leaving the cabin to Caleb because he is the only one who understands what I built there. Sienna is a lovely girl, but she only sees things through the lens of dollar signs. The cash will serve her lifestyle better. The judge, an older, no-nonsense woman, looked absolutely disgusted with my mother and sister. Her ruling from the bench was swift and merciless. Not only did she formally uphold the will in its entirety, completely dismissing their claims with prejudice, but she invoked a rare legal sanction. She ordered Martha and Sienna to pay 100% of my exorbitant legal fees, stating on the record that their lawsuit was a frivolous, cynical, and malicious attempt to override the crystal-clear wishes of the deceased for pure financial gain. About 2 weeks after the trial ended, I received an unexpected phone call from Julian, Sienna's fiancé. His voice sounded hollow. He asked to meet me privately for a beer at a dive bar across town. When I sat down, he looked at me with bloodshot eyes and said, "I ended the engagement. I moved out." I was stunned. What happened? Yeah. Julian took a long pull of his beer. I couldn't marry a sociopath, Caleb. When she was crying in your office that day, hyperventilating and sobbing, I found out she had spent an hour practicing that exact crying routine in our bathroom mirror that morning. The website you put up, the text to her friend. I thought I knew the woman I was sleeping next to, but the person I watched during this lawsuit wasn't a human being, it was a shark. He then revealed the most pathetic detail of all. Sienna had already completely blown through her entire legitimate inheritance. The $75,000 cash was gone in less than 6 months. She used it to lease a $95,000 luxury Porsche Macan she couldn't afford, bought a closet full of designer clothes, and booked a 3-week spiritual healing retreat in Tulum that cost $18,000. The $40,000 vintage Leica camera collection? She was too lazy to get them properly appraised, so she pawned them to a strip mall jeweler for less than $14,000 to pay off a single credit card. Through the family grapevine, I've learned that Sienna was formally evicted from her luxury apartment because she couldn't make rent without Julian's income. She is currently living in Martha's guest bedroom. She recently attempted to apply for a massive personal loan and listed me as a business partner and guarantor, claiming we had joint commercial ventures. I had my lawyer immediately fire off a cease and desist and flag her for identity fraud. She has also started a brand new GoFundMe to fund her independent art therapy practice, despite possessing absolutely zero medical or therapeutic certifications. Martha has spent the last month trying to convince the remaining extended family that I am a monster who illegally forged the medical documents. Some of the older, gullible relatives believe her. Most of them saw the website and have blocked her number. I have completely stopped caring. The poison is finally out of my life. This past weekend, Elena and I drove up to the Adirondack cabin. We didn't have to look over our shoulders. We didn't have to check the security cameras. We just existed. The dock is completely rebuilt with fresh treated cedar. And as we sat on the end of the dock watching the orange sun dip below the pristine tree line, Elena leaned her head on my shoulder and told me she is officially 12 weeks pregnant. We are having a little boy. We are going to name him Harrison. To anyone out there who is currently facing a similar nightmare, stand your ground. Do not let toxic emotional manipulation or the threat of ruining the family override legal documents and the dying wishes of someone who loved you. Grandpa's cabin is infinitely more than a piece of taxable real estate. It is a physical testament to a man who valued deep character over shared blood, relentless effort over lazy entitlement, and hard truth over comfortable manipulation. Martha and Sienna made their beds. They chose the absolute worst parts of human nature: greed, lies, and theft. Now they have to live in the miserable, broke, lonely reality they created for themselves. I have chosen peace. I kept my promise, old man. The cabin remains with someone who sees its true bleeding value. You're going to regret this, my brother texted after breaking my ribs. Dad said, drop the charges, but I replied, I'm not lying for anyone. I'm Emily, and I still have the anguish in my chest from when my brother Eric fractured my ribs during what should have been a nice family dinner. The physical anguish was severe, but nothing compared to hearing my parents tell me to keep quiet about it. They were more concerned with Eric's reputation than my damaged bones, but my doctor, a lady I'd never seen before that day, refused to participate in their cover-up. Her decision altered everything. Before I begin, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments. And if you've ever stood up to family injustice, click the subscribe button. You are not alone. Growing up in Oak Ridge, Michigan, was not the idyllic childhood depicted on television commercials. Our town had just about 15,000 residents, the kind of community where everyone knew each other's business and appearances were more important than practically anything else. This became the core of my family's values, but I didn't recognize it until much later. My family consisted of 4 members: me, my older brother Eric, and our parents, Richard and Diane Harris. From the outside, we appeared to be the picture-perfect American family. My father started a profitable real estate development company from scratch, while my mother was active in local charitable organizations and social clubs. We resided in a large colonial house in the most affluent district in town. We went to church on Sundays, took family trips twice a year, and our Christmas cards featured professional photo shoots that my mother spent weeks preparing. But inside our home, the reality was extremely different, especially for my brother Eric. Eric is older than me, and from my earliest memories, he had what my parents described as a bit of a temper. This bit of a temper meant that when we were kids, Dad would frequently smash my toys when he got furious. My grandmother had given me a collection of porcelain dolls, and Eric smashed 3 of them during tantrums. My parents would always buy me a replacement and explain that your brother has strong emotions. As we grew older, Eric's violence shifted from smashing my possessions to breaking my spirit. He would insult me, call me stupid, and attack my appearance. When I complained to my parents, they would shrug their heads and say it was just siblings being siblings. My mother would stroke my hand and say, that's just how brothers and sisters interact, Emily. You need to develop thicker skin. Throughout our upbringing, it became evident that Eric was our favorite. When I received straight A's, my accomplishment was recognized with a simple, good job. But when Eric managed to get a B- in a class where he was failing, my parents would take us all out to celebrate at the best restaurant in town. When I was accepted to the University of Michigan with a partial scholarship, my parents nodded in approval. When Eric was accepted into Michigan State after my father made a significant donation to their business school, they threw him a party and invited the entire neighborhood. Despite everything, I strove hard to be the ideal daughter. I chose to study medicine despite the fact that I like art more. My high school art teacher thought my watercolor paintings were quite impressive and urged me to apply to art schools. But my father dismissed the notion, calling it an expensive hobby rather than a profession. So I put down my paintbrushes and picked up a textbook instead. My parents prioritized our family's social standing in the community. My father's business was mainly based on his reputation and contacts. He served on the board of the local Chamber of Commerce, supported Little League teams, and ensured that his charity contributions were constantly reported in the local newspaper. My mother was president of the Garden Club, and she organized the annual charity ball to benefit the Children's Hospital. We weren't just residents of Oak Ridge. We were community pillars. The strain to preserve this image was relentless and oppressive. If I ever complained about Eric or voiced any bad feelings, my mother would quickly tell me, "We don't air our dirty laundry in public, Emily. People look up to the Harris family." My father was more forthright. "Your brother will take over the business someday. Nothing can tarnish his reputation." My feelings for my family were a complicated knot of love, hate, duty, and a desire for approval. I loved them because they were my family. However, as I grew older, I became aware of the toxicity of our relationship. Nonetheless, years of indoctrination made it difficult to believe my own senses. When I felt mistreated, a voice in my head sounded suspiciously like my mother, whispering that I was being overly sensitive or greedy. After finishing my medical degree, I completed my residency in Chicago, which provided me 2 wonderful years away from Oak Ridge and my family. The distance offered clarity. And, with the help of a therapist, though I told my parents it was only a stress management counselor, I began to see that my family's behavior was abnormal and unhealthy. But then my residency concluded, and an opportunity arose to join a medical practice in Oak Ridge. Despite my reservations, I accepted it. My sensible decision was based on finances. The post included loan forgiveness for my significant medical school debt. But, emotionally, I was still seeking my family's approval and hoping that our relationship would improve. When I returned, there were early indications that nothing had changed. At my welcome home dinner, Eric dominated the conversation with talks of his recent advancement at our father's company. When I tried to describe an interesting case from my residency, my mother interrupted me to ask if I had met any suitable young guys in Chicago. I spotted these red lights but chose to ignore them, convincing myself that things would be different now that I was an adult with my own career. I was mistaken. So wrong. The evening that altered everything was supposed to commemorate Eric's promotion to vice president of operations at our father's business. My mother had spent days getting ready, cooking Eric's favorite delicacies, and adorning the dining room with congratulations banners. I arrived early to assist set the table and prepare the salad, believing that my participation would make me feel more involved in the family celebrations. I had purchased a bottle of Eric's favorite whiskey as a gift. Even though I was pushing my budget that month due to the costs of moving into my new apartment, I wanted this evening to go well. I wanted to think that as adults, we could be a regular, loving family. The evening began well enough. My father opened an expensive bottle of wine, while my mother served her famous beef Wellington. Eric appeared to be in good spirits, taking compliments on his new role with his usual confidence that bordered on arrogance. He was already on his second glass of whiskey when we sat down to supper, which was not unusual for him. "To Eric," said my father, raising his glass. "Following in my footsteps and exceeding even my expectations. Harris Development will be in good hands with you at the helm someday." We all clinked glasses, and I added my own congrats. "The company's lucky to have you, Eric. Your clients at the Riverside project seem really happy with your work." Eric nodded gratefully. "Damn right they are. I turned that project around after Jackson nearly tanked it." The conversation continued nicely during the main meal. My mother inquired about my new position at the medical office, but her interest appeared superficial. Eric was almost on his third whiskey when he began chatting about Megan, his girlfriend of approximately 6 months. "We're talking about moving in together," he said. "Her lease is up next month, and it doesn't make sense to renew when she spends most nights at my place anyway." My mother remarked, "That's wonderful, dear," but I observed a small constriction around her eyes. She had always believed that couples should live together before getting married. "Megan's great," I said, truly meaning it. I had met her several times before and found her to be knowledgeable and polite. She mentioned last time I saw her that she's hoping we'll come to her family's lake house this summer. Eric's expression darkened slightly. "When did you talk to Megan?" "We ran into each other at the grocery store last week," I replied. "We chatted for a few minutes. She's really nice." "What else did she say?" Eric's tone had sharpened. I shrugged, not understanding his sudden attitude change. "Nothing much. She mentioned something about your dad's fishing boat needing repairs before you visit." "She should keep her mouth shut about my family," Eric snarled, interrupting me. The table went silent. My mother looked down at her plate, while my father cleared his throat uneasily. "Eric," I spoke gently. "She didn't say anything bad. She was just making conversation. Last month she had the nerve to say our family is intense," Eric continued, his voice rising. "Like her family is so perfect, with her alcoholic uncle and shoplifting sister." "I'm sure she didn't mean anything by it," my mother said, plainly attempting to calm the situation. But Eric was not listening. The drink had lessened his inhibitions, and he was preoccupied with perceived criticism. "And now she's talking about us to you behind my back." "It wasn't like that at all," I insisted. "It was just friendly conversation, right?" Eric scoffed. "Always so perfect, aren't you, Emily? The doctor, the good daughter. Everyone's favorite." I nearly smiled at the irony of his labeling me his favorite, but I knew better than to bring out the obvious. "Eric, I think you're misunderstanding." "Don't tell me what I understand." He slapped his glass down, splattering whiskey on the white tablecloth. My mother flinched and said nothing. My father has finally spoken up. "Son, let's dial it back. This is supposed to be a celebration." Eric rose abruptly, his chair scraping noisily across the hardwood floor. "I need some air." He stormed out of the dining room and towards the kitchen. After an awkward pause, my mother suggested we go to dessert. I offered to help clear the plates, using it as an excuse to check on Eric and perhaps make things better. I discovered him in the kitchen pouring another hefty serving of whiskey. "Eric, I'm sorry if I upset you," I replied quietly, setting the stack of dinner dishes on the counter. "That wasn't my intention." He turned to me, his eyes bloodshot. "You always do this," acting all innocent while stirring up trouble. That's not fair, I complained. I was just making conversation about Megan. I like her. Well, keep your nose out of my relationship, he said abruptly. And stop trying to buddy up to my girlfriend to get dirt on me. That's not what happened at all, I responded, my irritation mounting. Why would I do that? Because you've always been jealous of me, he explained, taking a step closer. Dad's company, Mom's attention, everything. You can't stand that I'm successful while you're still paying off student loans. His remarks wounded because they were so contrary from truth. It was such a total reversal of our family dynamic that I couldn't help but giggle in surprise. Are you serious, right now? That chuckle sounded like gasoline. Eric's face was distorted with wrath. Don't you dare laugh at me. Before I could react, he pushed me hard. I fell backward, the small of my back striking the sharp corner of the granite kitchen island. The hit knocked the wind out of me and caused a horrible split in my rib cage. My torso erupted with pain as I slumped to the floor, panting for air. My parents rushed into the kitchen in response to the ruckus. My mother shouted when she noticed me on the floor. My father froze in the doorway. What happened? My mother asked, glancing between Eric and myself. She fell, Eric exclaimed quickly. She tripped. I couldn't speak through my pain. Could barely breathe. Each attempt to inhale shot sharp shards of pain through my chest. My mom knelt beside me. Emily, can you get up, honey? My father eventually moved, drawing Eric away. What did you do? He hissed. Nothing. She's faking it, Eric asserted, despite the little trembling in his voice indicating that even he knew this was not true. I was able to sit up with the help of my mother, despite the fact that the movement caused me to cry in pain. He pushed me, I eventually exclaimed. I hit the counter. My mother's look shifted between concern and something else. Calculation. I'm sure it was an accident, she answered calmly. Eric wouldn't deliberately hurt you. But he did. And this was not the first time, just the most serious. I think I need to go to the hospital, I said, taking weak breaths. It hurts to breathe. Let's not overreact, my father murmured as he stepped forward. Take some ibuprofen and rest. If it's still bad tomorrow, we can reassess. I couldn't believe what I heard. I'm a doctor. I know what broken ribs feel like. Please, I need to go now. I'll drive you, my mom volunteered. I can drive myself, I answered, unwilling to spend another minute in that house. Despite the agonizing anguish, I needed to escape from them all. My father assisted me to my feet, his face covered with concern that did not reach his eyes. These family disagreements happen, he added gently. Let's not make more of this than it is. I didn't answer, instead concentrated on shallow breathing to alleviate the agony. I gathered my purse and keys and refused further assistance. As I slowly made my way to the door, I overheard my father speaking to Eric in loud whispers. The drive home was painful. Every bump on the road caused spasms of pain in my chest. I should have gone straight to the emergency room, but shock and denial drove me home instead. I promised myself I'd take some strong painkillers from my own medical kit and see how I felt. Part of me was still unable to process what had occurred. Not just Eric's violence, but how my parents reacted to it. That night was among the longest of my life. I couldn't lie down without feeling agonizing pain, so I spent it propped up in a recliner, going in and out of an uncomfortable slumber. By morning the discomfort had not subsided, and my side was now covered in an intense purple bruise. I couldn't move without gasping in pain. I realized then that I couldn't ignore this. I required medical care, regardless of what my family wished. The next morning brought not only bodily suffering, but also mental distress from my family's reaction. My phone began ringing. My mom's ringtone. I let it go to voicemail since I wasn't ready to speak with her yet. 10 minutes later, she called back. This time I responded. Emily, how are you feeling? Her tone was light and conversational, as if she were inquiring about a little headache rather than potentially shattered ribs. Not good, I said honestly. I'm in a lot of pain. I can barely move. These things always feel worse the next day, she remarked dismissively. Take some Advil and put ice on it. Listen, about last night. Mom, I think my ribs are broken, I said. Eric seriously hurt me. There was a pause at the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her tone was placating, as if she thought I was being tough. Sweetheart, it was an unfortunate incident. But let's not blow it out of proportion. Eric feels terrible about it. Has he said that? Has he called to apologize? I inquired, already knowing the answer. He will, I'm sure. He was very upset after he left. But right now, we need to focus on moving past this. Your father and I think it's best if we just put this behind us. I shifted in my chair, groaning at the sharp ache. Mom, I can't breathe without it hurting. This isn't something I can just put behind me. It's probably just bruised, she said. If Eric had really hurt you that badly, you would have gone to the hospital last night. The gaslighting was so clear that it would have been amusing if not so furious. I'm going to get it checked out today, I informed her sternly. Emily, she said with a cautionary tone. I think it's best if we keep this within the family. There's no need to involve outsiders in what was clearly just a momentary loss of temper. Outsiders? Mom, I'm talking about seeing a doctor for a medical injury. You know what I mean, she added hurriedly. Questions will be asked, forms will need to be filled out, things get put on record. Are you seriously asking me not to seek medical attention because it might reflect badly on Eric? I couldn't keep the surprise out of my voice. I'm asking you to think about the consequences, she said. Your father's business depends on our reputation in this community. Eric is positioned to take over eventually. A misunderstanding like this could have lasting repercussions. A misunderstanding, I repeated. He shoved me into a counter and broke my ribs. That's not a misunderstanding. That's assault. Don't use that word, she snarled. Your brother would never assault you. He had too much to drink and there was an accident. These things happen in families. Emily, before I could react, I heard my father's voice in the background begging for the phone. He answered the phone after a brief pause in the conversation. Emily, he replied, his professional voice on full display. How are you feeling? Like Eric broke my ribs, I answered honestly. He breathed deeply. Your mother tells me you're thinking of going to the doctor. I think that's premature. Give it a day or two to see if it improves. Dad, I am a doctor. I know what broken ribs feel like. Then you also know there's not much they can do for ribs anyway, he argued. They'll just tell you to rest and take pain medication, which you can do at home. He wasn't completely mistaken, but that wasn't the point. I need an X-ray to make sure there's no displacement that could puncture a lung. And if you go in, what exactly are you going to tell them about how this happened? His tone indicated that this was the main issue. The truth, I replied simply. There was a prolonged pause. Emily, I want you to think very carefully about what you're doing. Eric has worked incredibly hard to get where he is. His future at the company, his reputation in the community. These aren't things to jeopardize over a momentary lapse in judgment. So, his future matters. But my broken ribs don't? Don't twist my words, he remarked forcefully. Of course I care about your health. But there are broader considerations here. Eric made a mistake, yes. But he doesn't deserve to have his life ruined over it. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes. My father alternated between downplaying my injury and highlighting the potential repercussions for Eric and the family name. By the time we hung up, his message was clear. My misery and health came second to preserving Eric and the family image. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Sending you a little something to make you feel better. Love you. A delivery person arrived carrying an elegant gift basket containing pain medicines, a heating pad, luxury bath items, and my favorite chocolates. The card said, rest and recover. Family always comes first. Love, Mom, and Dad. The present felt like a bribe, an attempt to purchase my silence. I put it aside, unable to look at it without feeling ill. Throughout the day the calls continued. My mother checked in hourly, and each chat revolved around keeping the issue within the family. My father called 2 more times, his tone getting more strong, reminding me of family duty and perspective. Eric eventually called. I almost did not respond, but part of me wanted to hear what he had to say for himself. Hey, he murmured, his voice unusually quiet. Mom said I should call you. He made no apologies, simply admitted that he was calling because our mother wanted him to, I prompted. And I guess things got out of hand last night, he said regretfully. I had a lot to drink. You broke my ribs, Eric. Come on, I barely pushed you, he retorted, quickly defensive. You probably just bruised them when you fell. I didn't fall, you shoved me into the counter. Whatever, look, I'm calling to smooth things over, okay? Mom and Dad are freaking out that you're going to make this into some big deal. I couldn't believe what I heard. It is a big deal. I'm seriously injured. Yeah, well, we all have bad days, he dismissed. Remember when you crashed my car in high school? I didn't make that into a federal case. The parallel was so ludicrous that I couldn't even think of a response. A juvenile offender incident and a grown man physically beating his sister were not remotely similar. "Eric, I have to go," I finally said. "I have a doctor's appointment." "Emily, don't be stupid," he yelled, his conciliatory tone fading. "You're going to regret it if you blow this up." Was it a threat? I hung up without saying anything, my hands quivering with pain, fury, and astonishment. I contacted Rachel, one of the few people from high school with whom I had maintained a close relationship. She had returned to Oak Ridge after her divorce and was now working as a teacher at our former school. When I told her what had happened, her reply was exactly how my family should have been. "Oh my God, Steph. That's terrible. Do you want me to take you to the hospital right now?" Her sincere compassion brought me to tears. "I have an appointment with a primary care doctor, Dr. Hayes. She had an opening." "I'm coming with you," Rachel insisted. "No arguments. Text me the address and time." "You don't have to do that," I protested weakly, while a part of me urgently desired the support. "Yes, I absolutely do," she replied forcefully. "And afterward, you're coming to stay with me. You shouldn't be alone right now." By the time my visit arrived, the agony had been so bad that even the prescription-strength ibuprofen I had was ineffective. Every breath was torture, and I had developed a serious shortness of breath. I knew I couldn't put this off any longer, no matter how much pressure my family put on me. As Rachel drove me to the appointment, my phone lit up with calls and texts from my parents. Every communication had the same theme: silence, discretion, and family loyalty. But with each mile closer to medical care, I felt a stronger resolve. This wasn't correct. And, for the first time in my life, I refused to put my family's wants ahead of my own. The medical office was located in a contemporary facility on the outskirts of Oak Ridge, far enough from the town center that I was unlikely to encounter anyone my parents knew. Rachel assisted me from the car and supported me as we slowly made our way inside. When the receptionist noticed me wincing with each delicate step, she became concerned. "Dr. Hayes will be with you shortly," she promised me after I had completed the intake forms, intentionally leaving blank the portion asking how the injury occurred. I did not have to wait long, as the receptionist had promised. Dr. Evelyn Hayes turned out to be a woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and a straightforward approach. She reminded me of my favorite medical school professor, confident, clear, but with an underlying warmth that made patients feel at ease. "Dr. Harris," she murmured, reaching out her hand as she entered the examining room. "I've heard good things about you from Dr. Whitman at the clinic, though I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances." I tried to grin, but it came out more like a grimace. "Please call me Emily. And thank you for fitting me in on such short notice." "Of course," she said, looking over my intake documents. "I see you're experiencing chest pain and difficulty breathing. Can you tell me what happened?" This was the moment I had dreaded. My lifetime of brainwashing to protect my family clashed with my medical training and the basic human need to tell the truth. "I had an accident," I explained blankly. Dr. Hayes gave me a steady look. "What kind of accident?" "I was pushed and hit a counter," I responded quickly. "With my back, right here." I pointed to the place just below my shoulder blade. She nodded and made a note in my chart. "Who pushed you, Emily?" I hesitated before looking down at my hands. "My brother." "I see," she replied, her tone moderate but friendly. "Let's take a look at the injury first, and then we can talk more about what happened." "Okay." The physical examination was thorough, but gentle. Dr. Hayes listened to my breathing, carefully palpated the damaged area, and observed the considerable bruising that had occurred. Her expression remained professional, but I could sense concern in her eyes. "I'd like to get some x-rays," she stated after finishing the exam. "Based on your symptoms and the physical findings, I suspect you have at least 2 broken ribs, possibly 3. I'm also concerned about the shortness of breath, which could indicate a more serious complication." The x-ray verified her suspicions. 3 fractured ribs, one with a worrying displacement that accounted for my breathing difficulties. When Dr. Hayes returned to the examination room with the results, her expression was serious. "Emily," she said, sitting across from me, "these are significant injuries. The displacement of your 7th rib could potentially cause a pneumothorax, a collapsed lung, if not properly monitored and treated. I'm going to prescribe appropriate pain medication and give you specific care instructions, but I need to ask you some more questions about how this happened." I nodded as a lump formed in my throat. "You said your brother pushed you," she said gently. "Was this an accident during play, or was it deliberate?" "It was deliberate," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He was angry. He'd been drinking." "Has anything like this happened before?" I remembered all the times Eric had inadvertently wounded me growing up. The shoves that were too hard to be playful. The arm grabs that left fingerprint bruises. The times he'd thrown things at me in fury. Not this seriously, I finally said. But yes. He has a history of being physical when he's angry. Dr. Hayes nodded, her expression kind yet stern. And how have your family members responded to this incident? The dam broke. Perhaps it was. The pain medication starting to work, or the simple satisfaction of finally speaking with someone who appeared genuinely concerned. But I found myself telling Dr. Hayes everything. Eric's attack. My parents' indifferent response. Their pressure to keep silent. And their emphasis on the family's prestige above my well-being. They sent me a gift basket, I murmured, letting out a hollow laugh that sent pain through my chest. Like chocolates and bath bombs could make up for broken ribs. And the fact that they care more about how this affects Eric than how it affects me. Dr. Hayes listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes. When I eventually fell silent, she set down her pen and stared directly at me. Emily, as a medical professional, I want to be completely transparent with you about my obligations here. What you've described is a case of domestic violence. And in my position, I am a mandatory reporter. My heart fell. What does that mean exactly? It means that I am legally required to report incidents of suspected abuse to the appropriate authorities, she said with humor. In this case, that would mean filing a report with the police. Panic surged through my chest, competing with the pain in my ribs. You can't do that. My family would. I trailed off, realizing how telling my initial reaction was. What? Dr. Hayes asked gently. Be angry? Cut you off? Continue to prioritize your brother's reputation over your safety? It sounded so clear when it was pulled out that way. However, decades of family dynamics are not readily discarded. You don't understand, I said softly. It's complicated. I understand better than you might think, Dr. Hayes stated, startling me. When I was in my 20s, my father broke my arm during an argument. My mother begged me to tell the doctors I fell down the stairs, and I did, because I didn't want to tear our family apart. Her openness took me off guard. What happened? 2 years later, he put my mother in the hospital with a concussion and a broken jaw, she told me plainly. I've spent the last 30 years wondering if I could have prevented that by speaking up the first time. Her comments struck me like a physical blow. Was I encouraging Eric's actions by remaining silent? Would he eventually hurt someone else, such as Megan or his own children? I understand this is difficult, Dr. Hayes said. Family loyalty is strongly entrenched and the fear of consequences is real, but I'd like you to consider something. If one of your patients came to you with these same injuries and tail, what would you tell them to do? I knew the answer right away. As a doctor, I would strongly encourage them to report it, prioritize their protection, recognize the indications of an abusive relationship, but applying that criteria to myself seemed unthinkable. What exactly would happen? I inquired finally. If you report it. Dr. Hayes described the procedure thoroughly. A report would be filed. The cops would most likely want to interview me. I would be able to bring charges against Eric, however the prosecution may proceed even without my participation based on the medical findings. The incident would be documented anyway. I'm not going to pretend this will be easy, she told me. Honestly, based on what you've told me about your family, there will likely be significant pushback. But I also want you to know that there are resources available to help you through this process. I can connect you with a victim advocate who can explain your options and support you every step of the way. I sat in silence for a long time, considering my alternatives. The idea of going against my family filled me with fear. But the alternative? Pretending this had happened, enabling Eric's behavior to continue, unchecked, sacrificing my own well-being for the family image, became intolerable. Okay, I finally answered, my voice more stable than I expected. Do what you need to do, doctor. Dr. Hayes stretched out to gently squeeze my hand. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right decision. Not the easy one, but the right one. She spent the remainder of the visit establishing a treatment plan for my physical injuries, discussing the warning flags I should look out for, and scheduling a follow-up appointment. Before I left, she gave me contact information for a domestic violence counselor named Carmen, as well as a support group for family abuse survivors. Dr. Hayes said, "One last thing," as I was about to depart. "Do you have a safe place to stay? I'm concerned about potential retaliation once your family learns about the report." I nodded. My friend Rachel offered to let me stay with her for a few days. Good. Take her up on that offer, Dr. Hayes recommended. And if you ever feel unsafe or need immediate medical attention, don't hesitate to go to the emergency room or call 911. As Rachel drove me home, I felt an odd mix of anxiety and comfort. I didn't know what would happen next. But, for the first time in my life, I prioritized my personal well-being over my family's expectations. That was terrifying. But it also seemed like the first real breath of fresh air I'd had in years. That breath was painful, even with my fractured ribs. The consequences came sooner than I anticipated. I had hardly settled into Rachel's guest room when my phone burst with notifications. The local police had contacted my parents and Eric for their side of the tale, and they were furious. My father's voicemail sounded chilly and furious. "Emily, call me immediately. I cannot believe you would do this to your brother. To this family. We raised you better than this." My mother sent me a heartbreaking message. "How could you, Emily? After everything we've done for you, Eric is devastated. The police came to his workplace. Do you have any idea what this could do to his career? To our standing in the community?" Eric's text was more straightforward. "Thanks for nothing. Hope you're happy now that you've ruined everything." I turned off my phone, unable to handle the barrage. Rachel brought me tea and stayed with me as I cried. Not from physical agony, but from inner turmoil. How did I become the villain in this story? Why was I the one who ruined everything, but Eric was the one who acted violently? "They're trying to make you doubt yourself," Rachel explained sensibly. "Don't let them, you did the right thing." The following day offered more of the same. My phone continued to fill with messages from my immediate relatives, and now other family members were joining in. My father's sister, Aunt Lorraine, called to inform me I was tearing the family apart over a little disagreement. My cousin Adam texted that I was acting dramatic and attention-seeking. Even my grandma, who had always been kind to me, left a voicemail questioning why I couldn't handle the situation inside the family. Only Linda, my mother's younger sister, sent a different message. "I believe you, Emily. Call me if you need anything. Love you." I hadn't spoken with Aunt Linda in years. She had a falling out with my mother over something that was never revealed to me, and she had been mostly absent from family events ever since. Her unexpected help was a glimmer of hope in the storm. I took some time off work, using my medical leave to recover physically and emotionally. Dr. Hayes had linked me with Carmen, the domestic violence counselor, who called to check up on me and offer services. She indicated that what I was going through, the family closing ranks, victim blaming and pressure to recant, was unfortunately frequent in cases of family violence. "They're trying to maintain the status quo," Carmen explained. "Your speaking up threatens the family system they've established, where your brother's behavior is excused and enabled. It's painful, but their reaction actually confirms that you made the right choice by breaking the silence." I went back to my flat momentarily to pick up some more clothes and business papers. I just finished packing a bag when there came a loud banging on the door. I froze quickly, knowing who it was. When I looked through the peephole, I noticed my parents standing in the hallway, grim-faced. I debated not responding, but I knew the encounter was unavoidable. It's better to have it on my territory than theirs. I opened the door but did not invite them inside. "We need to talk," my father stated without hesitation. "I'm busy right now," I said, attempting to keep my voice steady. "Too busy for your family?" my mother inquired, her voice tinged with hurt and anger. "After what you've done, you owe us at least a conversation." I sighed and moved aside, allowing them to enter. They looked at my half-packed suitcase with contempt. "Running away?" my father inquired. "Taking care of myself," I clarified. "What do you want?" "We want you to fix this mess you've created," he stated simply. "The police are talking about charging Eric with assault. His job could be at risk. People are already talking." "I didn't make this mess," I shouted, a spark of rage piercing through my worry. "Eric did. When he broke my ribs." "It was an accident," my mom insisted. "He pushed you, yes, but he didn't mean for you to get hurt like that." "He's 28 years old, Mom. He doesn't get to hide behind he didn't mean it anymore. And it wasn't an accident. He deliberately shoved me because he was angry." My father moved closer, his intimidating stature intended to intimidate, as it had so many times in my upbringing. "Emily, you need to tell the police you want to drop this, say you exaggerated, that you misunderstood what happened." "I can't do that," I replied, taking a step back. "It would be lying." "So, you'd rather destroy your brother's life over one mistake?" My mother's voice broke into tears. "What kind of sister does that make you? What kind of brother breaks his sister's ribs and then calls her a barchar for seeking medical help?" I laughed. "What kind of parents care more about their son's reputation than their daughter's safety?" My father's face clouded with rage. "That's enough. We have always protected both of you. Everything we've done has been for this family. No, I answered, my realization solidifying as I spoke. Everything you've done has been for the family image, for Eric, never for me. That's not true, my mother argued. We put you through medical school because it looked good to have a doctor in the family, I said in kind. Not because you cared about what I wanted. I wanted to study art, remember? You both laughed at the idea. My father rejected it with a wave of his hand. This isn't about ancient history. This is about what you're doing right now, which is betraying your family. I'm not betraying anyone. I'm standing up for myself, maybe for the first time. The conversation went in circles, with my parents alternately guilt-tripping, threatening, and even attempting to get me to retract my story. When it became evident that I would not budge, my father used his final card. If you go through with this, you're on your own, he stated coldly. Financially, emotionally, in every way. Is that what you want? To lose your family over this? The danger should have scared me. In many respects, it did. But beneath the terror was an unusual sense of clarity. I lost my family the moment. You chose to protect Eric instead of me. I explained sadly. Maybe I never really had one to begin with. My mother started crying in earnest, and my father's face turned stone. You'll regret this, he finally said. When the dust settles and you've burned all your bridges, you'll realize what you've thrown away. After they went, I sat on my couch for a long time, trembling from the effects of adrenaline. I'd kept my ground, but the cost was becoming increasingly obvious. My phone vibrated with a text from Eric. I hope you're happy now that Mom is hysterical. Dad believes you are no longer alive. Great job, sis. The harassment did not end there. Eric's campaign against me grew in intensity over the following few days. He made vague but pointed remarks on social media about family traitors and attention-seeking liars. He called mutual acquaintances and told them his side of the event, portraying me as unstable and nasty. Most dangerously, he started spreading stories at the hospital where I worked, claiming that I had made up the abuse charges because I was jealous of his success. Some friends distanced themselves, uneasy about being sucked into family conflict. Colleagues gave me odd looks in the hallway. Even Rachel, as supportive as she was, seems overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation. I had no idea your family would react like this, she said one evening. I mean, I knew they were kind of intense, but this is next level. I nodded, acknowledging her distress. You don't have to keep letting me stay here if it's too much. I can find somewhere else. Don't be ridiculous, she stated firmly. I'm not abandoning you. I'm just saying it's a lot. But we'll get through it. Her dedication meant everything to me, especially while others drifted away. My circle was fast decreasing, and pressure was increasing from all directions. Work became more stressful as I tried to maintain my professional manner under the murmurs and pressure of Eric's smear campaign. The ultimate blow arrived in the shape of an ultimatum presented by my father's attorney. If I did not withdraw my statement to the police and the medical report within 48 hours, my parents would cut off all remaining financial support, including assistance with my school loan payments. Remove me from the family trust. 3 people publicly rejected me as their daughter. The letter ended with a reminder that they had always been gracious and would welcome me back into the family if I came to my senses and repaired the harm I had caused. I felt a shift inside me as I read those cold, calculating words. The shroud of doubt and guilt that had obscured my judgment began to lift. This was not love. It had never been love. Real families do not threaten, manipulate, or enable abuse. Real families protect one another from damage, not cause it. That night, I sat at Rachel's kitchen table with the lawyer's letter spread out in front of me, and made a decision. I was not going to retract. I was not going to lie. For perhaps the first time in my life, I was going to stand solid in my truth, no matter what the repercussions were. The next morning I called Carmen, a domestic violence counselor. I need help, I informed her. My family is escalating their pressure, and I don't know what to do next. You're doing exactly the right thing by reaching out, I was told. Let's talk about some practical steps to protect yourself and build a support system that doesn't include your biological family. That conversation marked the beginning of my journey toward actual independence, not only financially, but also emotionally and psychologically. It was terrible to face the future without the family I'd always had. However, as I would soon realize, it marked the beginning of a tremendous emancipation. I returned for a follow-up with Dr. Hayes. The physical recovery had started. The pain was less severe, and my breathing had improved. But, emotionally, I remained raw and vulnerable. How are you holding up? Dr. Hayes inquired after evaluating my ribs and confirmed appropriate healing. Physically better, I admit it. The rest? It's complicated. She nodded, indicating comprehension. Family trauma usually is. Have you been in touch with Carmen? Yes. She's been incredibly helpful. This was an understatement. Carmen had become my lifeline, guiding me through not only the legal parts of my predicament, but also the emotional minefield that was familial estrangement. She suggested that I attend a support group for family violence survivors. I went to my first meeting. Dr. Hayes agreed, saying, "That's excellent. How did it go?" It was intense, but good. For the first time, I was in a room full of people who completely understood what I'm going through. No judgment, no questions about why I didn't just work it out with my family. Dr. Hayes grinned. That kind of validation can be incredibly healing. I still remember my first support group meeting after my own experience. It was like finally being able to breathe after holding my breath for years. Exactly, I concurred. One woman there, Naomi, had a similar experience with her older sister. Her parents also chose the abuser over her. Hearing her story made me feel less alone, less crazy for standing my ground. You're definitely not crazy, Dr. Hayes informed me. What you're doing takes tremendous courage. Not many people have the strength to break generational patterns of abuse and enablement. Our topic went to my physical recuperation and preparations to return to work. Before I departed, Dr. Hayes gave me a card. I don't normally do this with patients, but given the circumstances, I want you to have my personal cell number. If you ever need medical advice or just someone to talk to who understands, please don't hesitate to call. Her generosity moved me to tears. Thank you for everything. I don't know what I would have done if I'd seen a different doctor that day. You would have found your way, she declared confidently. You're stronger than you realize, Emily. With Carmen's help, I started developing a support network outside of my original family. Rachel stayed steadfast, donating not only her guest room but her unflinching faith in me. Naomi from the support group became a friend, and our shared experiences formed an instant bond. And to my astonishment, my Aunt Linda contacted me again. I've been wanting to reconnect with you for years, she said as we met for coffee. Your mother made it difficult. After our falling out, she essentially blocked my access to you and Eric. What was the disagreement about? I inquired, realizing I'd never understood the full tale. Linda sighed. I confronted your father about his favoritism toward Eric and the way they both enabled his behavior. This was after I saw Eric push you at a family barbecue when you were about 14. You fell and scraped your hands badly. Do you remember? I remembered. Eric was upset because I had beaten him at a lawn game in front of his pals. My parents had dismissed it as siblings being competitive. Your mother accused me of trying to cause trouble in the family, she said. Said I was jealous because I didn't have children of my own. After that, I was gradually excluded from family events. But I always worried about you. Having Linda back in my life was like discovering a piece of myself that I had not realized was missing. She was the family I needed, supportive, honest, and protective in ways my parents never were. Along with developing these personal relationships, I took practical actions to maintain my freedom. I changed the locks on my flat, established a security system, and placed cameras at the entry. I spoke with a lawyer about the consequences of being removed from the family trust and cut off financially. I opened fresh accounts at a bank other than the one my family used. Small steps, but each one helped me feel more safe and in control of my own life. Carmen also provided me with materials to assist me better understand the psychological processes that had structured my family dynamic. I devoured books about toxic family structures, narcissistic parents, and the psychology of scapegoating. The more I knew, the more obvious my predicament became. Eric was the golden child, always pardoned and exalted despite his actions. I was the scapegoat, expected to accept blame and put everyone else's wants ahead of my own. This educational experience was both painful and empowering. It was painful to recognize how terribly dysfunctional my family was, but liberating to realize that it wasn't my fault. I had not provoked the abuse by being overly sensitive or tough, as my parents had often indicated. I had neither imagined nor exaggerated the mistreatment. It was real, and I had every right to defend myself from it. The most difficult aspect of this new knowledge was learning to establish and maintain boundaries. My entire existence had been based on meeting my family's demands and expectations. Standing steady in the face of their demand contradicted decades of conditioning. Think of boundary setting as a muscle, Carmen suggested during one of our sessions. It's weak at first because you've never been allowed to use it. But each time you hold your ground, it gets stronger. I practiced little acts of boundary setting on a daily basis, such as not responding to every call or text from my parents right away, refusing to engage when they tried to guilt or manipulate me, and correcting disinformation when common acquaintances repeated Eric's version of events. Each small act of self-advocacy increased my confidence for larger confrontations. The police investigation into the incident proceeded, and a prosecutor eventually decided to charge Eric with domestic abuse, despite my parents' efforts to intervene. Eric obtained an expensive attorney and pled not guilty, paving the way for a possible trial in which I would have to testify against him. The prospect was terrible, but I was determined to get through it. Despite all of this, I was surprised to find an unexpected sense of tranquility blossoming alongside the chaos. For so long, I had distorted myself to meet my family's expectations, ignoring my own needs and perspectives in order to maintain unity. Despite the exterior commotion, I was experiencing an interior alignment that I had never felt before. My ideas, feelings and actions were finally aligned. I was living my truth, as difficult as it was. My support group provided a safe place for me to discuss my anxieties and questions without being judged. During one especially difficult session, after receiving a caustic email from my father, I broke down. "Sometimes I wonder if it would have been easier to just stay silent," I said through tears. "To just take the pain and keep the peace like I always have." "Easier in the short term maybe," Naomi answered gently. "But that kind of silence eats away at your soul. Trust me, I tried it for years." Margot, an older woman, nodded in accord. "I stayed silent about my brother's abuse for 40 years. By the time I finally spoke up, I'd lost myself so completely, I didn't know who I was anymore. You're doing the hard work now, but you're saving yourself decades of invisible pain." Their comments lingered with me as a talisman against the uncertainty that occasionally crept in during weak moments. I'm doing the hard job now. I was stopping a cycle that may have lasted for generations. I was choosing truth over convenient lies, health over dysfunction, and reality over delusion. I felt well enough to move back to my own apartment full-time. Rachel assisted me in saving the space, a ceremonial scrubbing she swore by, and we moved the furnishings to make a fresh start. My parents' gift basket had long since been donated to a women's shelter, eliminating a symbol of their deceptive support. That night, alone in my own space for the first time since everything had happened, I took out my watercolors, which had been unused since college, and began painting. The image that appeared was unexpected, a small bird with a broken wing, surrounded by light and starting to heal. As I lost myself in the creative process that had previously been my passion, I sensed something moving, opening, and releasing inside me. I wasn't simply surviving this ordeal, it was profoundly transforming me. Time passed, bringing developments I could not have predicted. When I first sat in Dr. Hayes' office room with fractured ribs and a broken heart, physical recovery seemed unattainable. The ache has subsided. My ribs had healed without issues, with only a minor discomfort during weather changes to remind me of the damage. The emotional mending was a continuous process, but it was marked by significant improvement. I had moved to a different neighborhood, a little but significant step toward restoring my independence. My new apartment was brighter, with huge windows that let in plenty of natural light and a spare bedroom that I'd converted into an art studio. Paintings in various stages of completion adorned the walls, demonstrating my rekindled passion for creating. Throughout these months, my family situation has changed in painful but essential ways. After several attempts at reconciliation on their terms, which always entailed my retracting my exaggerated version of events and apologizing to Eric, I demanded a meeting with specific conditions. It would take place on neutral ground, with a family counselor present, and with the expectation that I would not be gaslighted or coerced to change my narrative. Surprisingly, they agreed. Perhaps they believed they could still persuade me in person. Perhaps they were experiencing the social implications of our separation in a culture where appearance was so important. The conference was held at the counselor's office on a cool autumn afternoon. My parents arrived impeccably dressed, as if for church, their emotions a delicate balance of concern and reserve. Eric arrived separately, his typical confidence tempered by the ongoing court case against him, which had been delayed due to procedural reasons. Dr. Collins, our counselor, established ground rules for our conversation. No interrupting, no name-calling, and the use of I statements instead of accusations. My parents nodded agreeably, but I could sense their dissatisfaction with what they probably saw as excessive formality. "Emily," Dr. Collins said, "would you like to start by sharing what you hope to achieve from today's meeting?" I took a deep breath and centered myself like I had practiced. I want clarity and honesty about what happened, and what happens next. I want acknowledgement of the harm that was done to me, both by Eric's actions and by the response to them. And I want to establish boundaries for any future relationship we might have. My mother had a tiny scowl at the word borders but stayed silent. My father shuffled in his seat, already uneasy about the course of the conversation. Richard and Diane, Dr. Collins addressed my parents. What are your hopes for today? My dad cleared his throat. We want our family back. Together. This division has gone on long enough. We want to put this unfortunate incident behind us and move forward. It wasn't an unfortunate incident, I explained quietly but firmly. It was an assault. Eric broke 3 of my ribs and then called me a bitch when I sought medical help. You both pressured me to lie about my injuries and prioritize his reputation over my physical safety. Emily, you know that's not how it happened, my mother said, her voice taking on the placating tone that I'd come to recognize as the precursor to gaslighting. Actually, Mom, that is exactly how it happened, I responded. And this pattern of denying reality is precisely why we're sitting here today. Dr. Collins carefully turned the discourse, asking each of us to convey our emotions without contradicting one another's experiences. What followed were hours of painful, but essential, truth-telling. My parents continued to minimize and deflect, albeit with less determination than previously. Eric apologized superficially, focusing on the inconvenience the issue had given him rather than the pain he had perpetrated. I'm sorry things got out of hand, he muttered, without meeting my gaze. I never meant for you to get seriously hurt. But you have to admit, going to the police was an extreme reaction. Was it? I inquired, keeping my cool despite the wrath simmering beneath the surface. If a stranger had broken my ribs, would reporting it be extreme? Why should you be held to a lower standard of behavior because we're related? He had no decent response for that. By the end of the session, it was evident that, while my family wanted me back, they were unable to admit the dysfunction that had caused our estrangement. They sought reconciliation without accountability. Forgiveness without change. As we were about to leave, my father made one final appeal. Emily, we miss you. Despite everything, we're still your family. No one will ever love you like we do. I took a hard look at him. Possibly for the first time. That's the problem, Dad. The way you love is conditional and harmful. I deserve better. We all do. Walking out of that office, I felt an unanticipated lightness. I had confronted my greatest fear, permanent isolation from my family, and discovered that it was not as frightening as I had thought. In fact, the notion of continuing to accept their definition of love felt even more terrifying than establishing a life without them. In the years that followed, I had little contact with my parents, just sending SMS and making brief phone calls with strong restrictions in place. Eric and I had no direct communication, save for obligatory legal interactions. His case eventually resulted in a plea agreement, a misdemeanor charge with probation, and mandatory anger management sessions. It was less than he deserved, but it required more accountability than he had ever confronted. Professionally, my life took an unexpected turn. The boldness I gained from standing up to my family turned into more confidence at work. I advocated more effectively for my patients, especially those who showed evidence of abuse or neglect. My colleagues saw the shift, and I was offered a leadership role in a new community health initiative aimed at preventing and intervening in domestic abuse. This work put me in regular contact with Dr. Hayes, who became a mentor and friend. During one of our sessions to discuss the idea, I was finally able to convey my gratitude. I wrote you a letter, I explained, handing her the envelope. To thank you for what you did that day. For seeing what was happening and having the courage to do something about it. She accepted the letter with a friendly grin. I was just doing my job, Emily. No, I said, shaking my head. You did more than that. You showed me what true professional integrity looks like. You were willing to make a difficult choice because it was the right one, not the easy one. That's the kind of doctor I want to be. Our collaborative efforts on the idea became one of the most enjoyable aspects of my working life. We devised training programs for medical professionals to help them recognize and respond to indicators of abuse, as well as patient resources and connections with local support agencies. Each person we assisted felt like a small redemption for my own experience. My personal life thrived as well. The support group that had been my lifeline in the beginning evolved into a community where I could receive and offer healing. Naomi and I organized a monthly gathering for survivors to exchange art, poetry, and experiences as part of their healing process. Rachel was my closest friend, and her dedication during my worst days solidified a bond that seemed more like family than many blood links. Speaking of family, Aunt Linda became a pivotal influence in my life. Her home became my vacation destination. Her knowledge guides her through the difficult emotions of starting a new family after the previous one failed. Through her, I reconnected with cousins I'd scarcely known growing up, establishing relationships free of the dynamics that had poisoned my own family. Most surprise, I started dating again after years of focusing only on my profession. Marcus, a lovely and thoughtful architect whom I met through a community art class, demonstrated healthy communication and respect in a romantic relationship. Our relationship grew gradually, based on friendship and common ideals rather than the urgent need for approval that had defined my prior relationships. On the anniversary of my meeting with Dr. Hayes, I went on a solo retreat to a lakeside cabin. I took my paints, a journal, and a stack of books, planning to reflect on my voyage. I sat on the dock at sunset, watching the light play across the sea, and wrote in my journal. A year ago today, I was broken in more ways than I realized. My ribs were broken, but so was my sense of self, my understanding of love, and my faith in my own judgment. I felt telling the truth would ruin me. That I couldn't live without the family that had both shaped and twisted me. I was mistaken. The truth did not ruin me. It made me stronger than before. I discovered that genuine love does not necessitate quiet about abuse. Real family, whether by blood or by choice, pushes you up rather than dragging you down. True strength is not suffering mistreatment, it is having the fortitude to say no more. I'm not sure what the future holds. My relationship with my parents is complicated and limited. Eric and I may never reconcile. There are still days of pain and uncertainty. But for the first time in my life, I'm laying a foundation founded on truth rather than deception. Instead of obligation, focus on true connection. Focusing on self-respect rather than self-sacrifice. That seems like victory. That feels like healing. It feels like home. As I write this, I'm wondering how many of you have had similar crossroads in your own families. Have you ever had to choose between peace and the truth? Self-preservation or family loyalty? I would love to hear your stories in the comments section below. If my story has made even one person feel less alone or more empowered to get treatment, then sharing it has been beneficial. Please like this video if it speaks to you. Subscribe for more stories on healing and transformation. Also, share it with someone who may need to hear that they deserve better. Remember that sometimes the family we form is more therapeutic than the one we were born into. Thank you for listening. Take care. Good luck. You're a selfish mistake, my dad said while my mom dragged me to save my sister. Then the doctor spoke 6 words, and my mom hit the floor. My mom lied to the hospital, my dad called me a mistake, my sister just smirked. Then I took the podium, held up the test results, and said her name. What a dramatic family, right? Now let me tell you how this whole mess began. Hello. My name is Ava, and I was never truly a member of the family who raised me. My mother once ripped up my medical records in public, screaming that I was letting my sister die. My father stood beside her and called me a selfish mistake. They tried to force me to give up part of my liver for a sister who used to laugh at my tears, and told our school I was adopted before I knew it. But the thing that still wakes me up at night is the doctor's 6 words, and how my mother crumbled when she realized she couldn't lie any longer. What happens if your entire existence was founded on a lie? And have you always been an insurance policy? I remained in that chair, petrified, mortified, and immediately convinced that this wasn't simply about a liver. The air around me had thinned, as if each breath were borrowed rather than earned. Shreds of my medical information flew around my feet, landing like abandoned receipts from a transaction I had never committed to. My mother stood over me, heaving with dramatic sadness, urging that I do the right thing, as if that phrase still had meaning in our family. Do you think you can sit there and act like a victim? She snapped, her voice piercing the quiet lobby like a dropped tray. Your sister is dying. Ava is dying, and you are doing nothing. Absolutely nothing. I looked around, not at her, but at the strangers observing. A nurse pretends to organize a file cart. A lady grips her toddler tightly. A receptionist tapped idly on her keyboard. I saw it. The discomfort, pity, and assumptions. Nobody came to my defense. That was not new. I knelt to grab a few papers that had fallen near my shoes. Not because of guilt. I needed them. Proof. A record. Something substantial that cannot be twisted like a bedtime story. My hand shook. Just somewhat controlled. Mom moved a step closer, nearly whispering, as if the decrease of volume made it more intimate, more genuine. I did not raise you to be this cold and ungrateful. We gave you everything. I gazed up directly into her eyes. You gave me what you thought I owed you for. She blinked. And that was all. The first moment of silence. There was no accord or peace, only a hollow hole where her wrath could not go. Then came the scream. You are letting your sister die. It echoed. Actually echoed. She knew it would. A nurse stood motionless behind the vending machine. A security man in the hallway turned his head. Mom's voice resonated like a headline. I did not flinch. I did not cry. I didn't move since I knew it wasn't the first time she had expressed grief. And I would not be the one to give her an encore. Behind the glass wall of room 311, Lila rested in her hospital bed, pale but composed. Chemotherapy had eased the wrinkles of her once flawless beauty routine, but not her gaze. Her eyes met mine, held them, and grinned. Not a single smile of thanks, relief, or hope. Ownership. That was always her specialty. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Her expression said everything. I'm still in the center, you are still orbiting. A part of me expected pity from her, or perhaps desperation, but seeing that smug, satisfied expression did something strange. It unearthed something. I stood carefully, gathering as many papers as I could. My mother's breathing had been irregular just seconds before, but it had now settled into a martyr's silence as she channeled her wrath. You'll regret this, Ava, she murmured gently, not looking at me. One day, when she's gone, and this family is gone, you'll remember this moment and hate yourself. I inclined my head, not mocking but studying. Funny, I mumbled. I remember a lot of moments, and none of them looked like family. With that I turned. Not toward Lila. Not toward my mother. Not even near the exit. I approached the nurse's station. A few people cleared the path. The nurse who had been closest to the scene caught my gaze briefly. She opened her mouth, as if to speak, but paused. I didn't need her words. I didn't need hers or anyone else's because everything I wanted to say, every rebuttal, explanation, and proof that I wasn't who they painted me to be, was there on the floor, ripped and more intact than what they had attempted to establish as a family. As I approached the far end of the corridor, I paused for a moment. I recall thinking, this is when everything breaks. Not when they screamed, but when I remained silent. I did not yell. I did not collapse. I just walked. And as soon as my foot crossed into the opposite corridor, I realized something that rattled me more than anything else that morning. They were not coming to save Lila. They were here to show that I could still be controlled. But I did not offer them that. And I would not. Not now. Not ever again. But the next blow did not come from my mother. It comes from my father. I hadn't taken a complete step past the nurse's station before I felt his presence. He did not say my name. He never had. Not with warmth. Just stood there, broad and upright, as if the world owed him respect for being alive. His shadow settled on the tiles in front of me, and I hesitated because I hoped he would finally say something that wasn't prepared, weaponized, or aimed to draw me back into stillness. Instead, he stated it as a fact. Not an insult. Not a scream. This is just a statement. You're just a selfish mistake. No one raised their voice. There is no accusing finger. There was not even a quiver in his jaw. That was the worst part. It was not spoken in anger. It was spoken as if he had believed it for a long time and had ran out of reasons to deny it. I blinked but did not cry. I did not ask him what he meant. That would have afforded him the dignity of disbelief. Instead, I allowed the words to hit me like wet cement, pressing down yet hardening quickly. I wouldn't let them sink too deeply. Behind him, Lila's room was still lit up like a stage. She had not moved. She did not need to. That small smirk she wore when I arrived remained carved on her face like a scar she never had to explain. I moved aside to avoid bumping his shoulder. It used to feel like disobedience. Now it felt like I was just maintaining my space, breath, and body. Walking away, I could feel every year of my existence press against my back, like a hand urging me to apologize. I continued walking. When I got to the water fountain near the family consultation lounge, I paused. Not to drink, but to breathe. And that's when my mind, traitor that it could be, started flipping through memories, like old case files. Lila sat in the window seat on the plane on one of my childhood vacations. I got the middle seat, between my folks and the drink cart. Mom thought I was too short to need the view. My birthday. Lila acquired an automobile. I received a sweater. Dad answered, "You don't go anywhere anyway." Lila spilled coffee on my college acceptance letter before I could open it, so I never got to read it. She insisted it was an accident. Mom believed her. Be grateful, they always advised. We didn't have to take you in. Even though I had no idea I was adopted, I could hear the tone. I realized I was being reminded of a debt I never wanted to owe. I didn't know I was leaning against the wall until a nurse passed by and looked my way. Her eyes caught mine briefly, inscrutable, before going on. Nobody asked if I was okay, and honestly, I was relieved. I didn't want a witness at this point. I needed it to be mine. I took my phone out of my pocket, hands firm now. I browsed through my inbox until I came across a subject line I recognized. National Donor Match Results, Confidential. There it was, from the moment I learned Lila was unwell and took the test before anyone asked me to. Previously, guilt was sent to collect. I had not told them. I hoped that if I wasn't a match, it would end there. That logic was evidently naive. I pushed ahead, typed Dr. Holstrom's contact information, and added Jenna Cruz, my friend and emergency backup for any legal mess I hadn't anticipated but had learned to prepare for. Subject line, confirming record incompatibility. I pressed send. I looked at the screen, at my own name. My real name. Ava Monroe. Not Lila's sister. Not Evelyn's daughter. Just Ava. I pressed send. When I raised my head, Dad was gone. Mom was also present. I assumed they'd moved on to the next round of moral blackmail. Perhaps they were meeting with hospital staff to discuss my emotional instability. They had done this previously. The irony was that they had spent so many years convincing others that I was dramatic, fragile, and broken, while I had spent the same amount of time attempting to be calm, quiet, and rational. But now I've realized something that surprised me. I didn't want their approval anymore. Their disappointment is no longer hurtful, it clarified. It proved that I had moved far enough away from their game to finally see the rules. Back in the foyer, the nurse behind the desk gave me a wary smile. Do you require a guest pass to re-enter the room? I shake my head. Number, I'm going out for a little while. Will you be back? I weighed her question, not just now, but always. I'll let you know, I said before walking out the door. Outside, the air had cooled. Early spring in Raleigh smelled like flowering magnolia mixed with city dust and wet concrete. It kept me grounded in the real world, away from fluorescent lights and old family memories. As I approached the parking garage, I halted. My automobile was not there. I had taken a rideshare that morning because I did not trust myself to drive. I called another. 5 minutes left. There's enough time to do one more thing. I launched the Notes app on my phone and typed, if they ever claim I was rejected for no reason, here's the timeline. Tested. Results were received. Notified. The National Registry certifies that I'm not a match. Then, without really thinking about it, I added, you cannot donate what you do not have. You cannot love if you are not permitted to exist. And you can't stay somewhere you weren't actually invited. I've saved it. An automobile pulled up. I got in and told them the address of a quiet, neutral coffee shop a few blocks away. I needed a moment. Not to flee, but to ponder. They intended to transform me into a villain. But I was not going to play that role. I had my facts and proof, and I would soon have my voice. Not the one that begged to remain little, but the one that had been gradually clearing its throat for years. They assumed I was a mistake. But I was ready to demonstrate what a mistake looks like once it stops apologizing. A few minutes after. Leaving the hospital's side entrance, I spotted a bench across the street near a calm bus stop. I hadn't planned on going anywhere. I just needed a place to sit without being monitored. Without voices booming through my chest. I tightened my coat. Not because I was chilly, but because I needed to feel something wrapped around me that wouldn't take anything away. My phone buzzed at that moment. I assumed Jenna Cruz was checking in. Perhaps even a professional message, but it wasn't either. Subject, saw the news. I thought you would need this. It came from Olivia Reyes. I hadn't seen or heard from her in almost 13 years. She moved away the summer before senior year. She was the sole person who witnessed what transpired behind our doors and chose not to look away. There was no greeting, just a brief message. I have retained this. I wasn't sure if it mattered anymore, but I saw your name. I knew it would. 3 scanned photos were attached. The first was a lined notebook page with Olivia's handwriting on top. Ava is after the steps. Below is a brief summary of what she had witnessed that day. A scream. A thump. The way Lila smiled while calling for Mom. The second image made me stop breathing. It was a Polaroid. Faded and blurry, but unmistakable. The outline of a bruise on my ribs. The date is written in pen at the bottom. May 16th. The third was a folded note with my handwriting. I had forgotten that it existed. If something happens again while I'm not at school, could you kindly notify Miss Braxton? I'm not sure I can tell her myself. I gazed at the television until my vision clouded. I was not crying. It was simply the weight of being seen all at once. After decades of being erased, not imagined, not exaggerated, not fabricated for attention. It happened. It was real. I scrolled up to reread the email. Only 3 lines. Olivia never enjoyed drama. She never said anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. I launched my voice recorder app and sat there, phone on my knee, allowing the air to fill with a non-stinging silence. And then I began speaking. They often accused me of being dramatic, lying, and making up stories because I couldn't deal with reality. But I handled it nicely. I handled things softly, too quiet. I halted. An automobile passed. A woman walked her dog across the street. The globe kept moving. They led me to believe that suffering was a performance that didn't count until it resulted in smashed dishes or black eyes. But bruises fade. Lies remain. My hands did not shake this time. I saved the file and titled it, Statement Draft 1. I opened a blank email and began to write, not to send right away, but to prepare and be ready. To the hospital's ethical board. 2. The legal staff. If necessary, I could speak to the media. This wasn't vengeance. This was clarification. They trained me to keep secrets. But they forgot that written secrets can survive. I wasn't going to allow them to write my story in pencil again. By the time I stood up, my spine felt taller than it had throughout the morning. I was not angry. I had a sense of harmony. I started walking. No destination, just moving. That type of movement occurs when your body has to burn through memory. My phone vibrated as I passed the coffee shop on the corner. A text. Jenna Cruz is still breathing. I grinned without intending to. I typed back. Yes. For now. I continued walking. By the time I returned to the hospital door, dusk had set in. The lights within the structure came to life one by one. I did not go back inside. I did not need to. Instead, I got out my phone, read Olivia's email once more, and saved the attachments to a private folder titled, They Knew Because They Did. They understood who Lila was, what Evelyn safeguarded, what Thomas disregarded. They didn't simply let it happen, they planned it. It has been maintained. I utilized it. They did not simply forget what they did. They counted on me to forget. But I did not. And now, I won't let anyone else forget. I stood there staring at Lila through the thin glass pane, her face still molded in that smug half-smile. She had not expected me to find out. That much was evident. The silence between us was not quiet. It was weighted with calculation rather than confusion or anguish. I turned and headed down the corridor, just as Dr. Holstrom motioned me back into his office. His tone remained unchanged from earlier. Measured. Clinical. This time, however, his eyes twitched with caution. Ms. Monroe. Thank you for coming back in, he added, gesturing to the chair across from him. I sat silently. I had finished exchanging niceties. He opened a file on his screen and tapped it with his pen. There's something wrong with your file. I'm trying to check all registry activity, and it appears you've previously been verified for compatibility. I blinked. Yes, I was. When I found out Lila was sick, I filed a donor test. He tilted his head. The issue is, your mother marked on intake that you hadn't, that this was your first evaluation. My stomach clenched, but my voice remained firm. Was the result sent to her? He nodded slowly. You listed Evelyn Monroe as your emergency contact. The National Donor Registry stated that they emailed the results to her, along with the normal statement stating that you were not a match. For a little while, I was unable to breathe. She knew. She had an answer. She read it. And she continued to pull me. Here like sheep. As if I owed them my body just because they fed me once. I closed my eyes. That was not a falsehood. It was sabotage. I want a printed copy, I finally said. About that email and the registry confirmation. I want it for my records. He nodded and moved through a few panels before standing. Give me a few minutes. I will print and stamp the documents and return them myself. When he went, I took a cautious breath and opened my phone. The screen flashed back at me, packed with messages from Mom, Lila, and even Dad. All are unread. It's all needless. I sent a new message to Jenna Cruz. She lied about the test. She had it the entire time. I was not a match. I never was. Seconds later, her reply appeared. Have you got proof? I responded with a screenshot, adding, I'm asking the hospital to document it right immediately. Her next message arrived quickly. Good. Send me the entire copy. It's time to properly defend oneself. The door creaked open again. Dr. Holstrom re-entered with a manila folder. He handed it to me without sitting down. Inside, you'll find a notarized declaration, the original registry letter, and a timestamp that shows who accessed it. Everything is legally permissible, if that becomes necessary. Thank you, I said sincerely. He hesitated and added, I appreciate that this is a personal concern, but concealing that information was not only unethical from a medical ethics standpoint. It was dangerous. I did not nod. He did not speak. I simply stood and left. I passed Lila's room again, but this time I didn't look through the window. I came to a stop right in the doorway. She looked up from her phone, still in bed, with IV lines trickling down her arm. Her smile was smaller now, more measured. You know I'm not a match, I replied. My voice is mild yet steady. Her mouth twitched. However, no words followed. You always knew, I explained. Did you think I'd be bending forever? Still nothing. Only a blink. A slow, shocked blink. I stepped away before she could react, striding with more determination than I'd had before the circus began. At the elevator bank I pushed the button and waited. I peered at the warm glow of the downlight, as if it held secrets I had yet to discover. When the doors opened, I entered alone. I was not ready to leave the hospital completely. Not yet. I went down to the small atrium cafe behind the drugstore. It was almost empty, except for a young couple arguing softly at a table and a nurse sipping tea by the window. I ordered a coffee that I didn't need and sat in the far corner, opening the folder again. Page after page was stamped and signed with what I needed. I began preparing an official statement, not just for the hospital, but for the legal record. Ava Monroe was already evaluated for organ donation compatibility with Lila Monroe. The test findings indicated that I was not a biological match. These results were delivered to Evelyn Monroe, who purposefully kept them from both me and the treating physician. I'm making this public statement to affirm that any suggested rejection to donate was not due to indifference or cruelty, but simply a lack of compatibility information that my family opted not to divulge. I reserve the right to take additional action if this information is used to coerce, embarrass, or slander me in any way. It was clean, direct, honest. And it was mine. I emailed the manuscript to Jenna Cruz, attached copies of the documents, and briefly turned off my phone. I needed some quiet, because even though they lied to me about everything, I was the one who had to deal with the fallout. They didn't simply manipulate me. They manipulated the system, the records, the expectations. However, for the first time, the paper trail did not favor them. It favored me. And the stillness I'd worn as armor for years? It was no longer a shield. It was a weapon. I did not wait for Lila to speak. I did not need to. That blink spoke it all. She had not expected me to find out. Not about the test. Not about the email. Not about anything. She assumed I would do what I had always done, accept the guilt, swallow the anguish, and play the part. But not this time. I stepped away from the doorway and proceeded down the corridor, past the elevators, to a calmer wing. I discovered a location in a corner alcove where the hospital had set up some chairs and a water dispenser. The illumination was subdued there, away from the bustle of nurses and family members moving between rooms. My legs eventually gave out as I sank into a chair and placed the manila folder, still warm from the copier, on my lap. I initially felt the difference in my physique. Not in wrath. Not even sadness. Just a clarity that made everything else quieter, like static going out. That is when she emerged. A nurse. Young. Perhaps late 20s. She walked over with hesitation. Are you okay? She asked softly. I did not nod. I did not shake my head. She placed the cup in my palm, her speech barely audible. You don't have to do anything you don't want to, she told me. Even if they scream. I looked up. Her gaze remained steady. She was not guessing. She knew. And with that, something inside me reset. Not everything. Not all at once. But something. Thank you, I replied. My voice cracked. She stood and walked away without saying anything. She did not linger. She did not wait for recognition. She simply did what no One else had done and acknowledged the mess without asking me to clean it up first. I sipped some water. It was frigid. Real. And I kept on to that experience for precisely 2 seconds before hearing the sound of determined footfall. They were close. Familiar. Evelyn and Thomas. Of course. They moved like a two-person storm. Her cheeks reddened. His look is unreadable. She held a clipboard in her hand, and I knew what was on it before she lifted her consent documents. "Where the hell have you been?" Evelyn hissed. Her voice sounded low, sharp. "We've been looking for you." I stood carefully and placed the empty cup on the seat near me. I needed air. Thomas did not speak, just gazed. As always. She pushed the clipboard toward me. "Sign it." "No." Her eyes expanded. "Ava, do not do this. You are her sister." I shake my head. "I am not. And you knew it before I did." Her hands trembled slightly. "This is not about DNA. This is about family, love and decency." I took a step back. "No, it is about control. It has always been." Thomas's hand moved abruptly. Not violent. Just fast. He grasped my forearm. Evelyn took another step forward, this time holding the clipboard. "Sign it," she stated. "This is for your sister. For your soul." That was when I snapped. Not too loud. Not particularly dramatic. But finally. "Touch me again," I snarled, locking eyes with Thomas. "And I'll file charges." "Do you believe that clipboards protect you?" "It does not. I have proof now. Real proof." He let go immediately. A neighboring nurse, possibly alerted by the tension, appeared around the corner. She looked between us. "Is everything okay here?" she asked, her voice calm yet forceful. I nodded. "I'm leaving." Evelyn turned to face the nurse. "She is trying to abandon her sister. She is making this about herself." The nurse looked at me, then back at Evelyn. "That is her decision. We can arrange for her to have a patient advocate, but you can't speak for her." That silenced Evelyn, at least for a moment. As I turned to walk away, the sound of her sobbing began to fill the corridor behind me. "No, not at all. Do not be afraid." Only the performance she thought was still effective. I returned to the hospital lobby and discovered a tiny seating space near the front windows. I sat down, opened my phone, and forwarded every document I had, including test results, registry timestamps, and a synopsis of what had just occurred. I copied the hospital's ethics board, legal team, and Jenna Cruz. I added a single line at the bottom. I didn't reject it. I was never eligible. They knew. They lied. They tried to force it anyway. I pressed send. Then I shut off the phone. And for the first time, I no longer felt the need to explain myself. Not for them. Not to anyone. This was not about protecting who I was. This was about recording who they were. I did not sleep that night. Not even a little. I spent the first half pacing the living room of the apartment I was renting on a month-to-month basis near the hospital. The curtains remained open from earlier, with city lights streaming in through the glass, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. I was seated at the kitchen table. I have the hospital folder in front of me, a highlighter in one hand, and a pen in the other. I was not their daughter. I was their backup plan, their leverage. And now I have something they did not expect. Paperwork. By the time I got back to the hospital, my steps seemed slower, but each one was firmer than the last. I walked directly to the front desk and asked to meet with Dr. Holstrom again. He spotted me shortly after, his look unreadable, and welcomed me back into his office. "I reviewed the file," he said cautiously, professionally, but not coldly. "There's something you should see. It is unusual." He rotated his screen to face me. A scanned copy of the form. Hospital letterhead. My name is properly typed toward the top. Medical power of attorney signed, Ava Monroe. Dated 4 weeks ago. I frowned. "That's not my signature." He did not seem surprised. "It does not match the information on your intake forms or registry test. However, the document was submitted by a family member at Lila's readmission." I could feel my teeth clenching. "Who submitted it?" "Your mother. Evelyn Monroe, of course." A fake document. I used to say that I had previously consented. Probably so they could expedite whatever guilt campaign they were planning next, or worse, authorize something without requiring my signature again. I requested a printed copy. He handed it over instantly. "This is a complaint," I informed him. "With the hospital's legal staff. And with my lawyer." He gave one nod. "We will cooperate wholeheartedly." I have already started notifying the administration. I walked out of that room, carrying the document under my arm like a weapon. And I didn't wait. Back in the visitor's lounge, I sat down and photographed the fake papers. I opened an email to Jenna Cruz, uploaded the photo and typed only one line. They falsified my consent. This just grew into something bigger. Before I could even push send, another message from her appeared. Do you need me to contact the press yet? Or are you still hoping they have a soul somewhere inside? I smiled, dry and bitter, but smiled nonetheless. Let's start with the ethics board, I said. Then let's see what burns first. I tapped send, then stood up, turned toward the elevator, and pressed the button that would transport me to Lila's floor. She was awake when I stepped in, sitting up slightly and flipping through a magazine she obviously wasn't reading. Her expression remained unchanged when she saw me. You knew, I answered quietly. You could tell I wasn't a good match. You saw the results. She did not refute it. Did not even blink. And yet, I said. You allowed them to haul me in here like livestock. You saw them tear me apart in the corridor. You allowed them to yell that I was letting you die. She gave a slight shrug. Did you show up? The audacity in such a sentence. The calculation. She did not need to yell. She did not need to lie. She only needed to wait. I came because I thought I could still believe in something, I was saying. This is not due to you. Certainly not for them. She tilted her head back, laying it on the pillow. You're still making it about yourself. I took a step closer, not aggressively, to ensure she heard me correctly. I sent all the documents to the board. I have the original registry findings. A fabricated power of attorney. The timestamps. Your texting history. I didn't just come to fight, Lila. I brought the receipts. Something flickered on her face. Do not be afraid. Just an annoyance. As if I were an uncomfortable knot in the middle of her neatly wrapped ribbon. As I turned to leave, I said one final thing. You did not win. You simply delayed the truth. I exited the room without looking back. Downstairs, I sent out another round of emails. One for the hospital's compliance department. One for their legal office. Another message for Jenna Cruz. Each one carried every document, line and date. The hospital responded with an acknowledgement of receipt. They would launch an internal probe immediately. The email concluded with this sentence. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. We take ethical transgressions seriously. I stared at that line for a long time. Because it wasn't only about ethics. It was about dignity. About not being transformed into a tool because someone else believed your body should be an extension of their regret. I began writing a legal affidavit and a formal statement under oath. I wrote it clearly. Without metaphor, without wrath. Just facts. I mentioned everything. The deception about the test, the falsified document, and the manipulation. And then, at the conclusion, I added one sentence that wasn't necessary but was mine. This isn't a daughter's rebellion. It represents a woman's refusal to be erased. If they wanted war, they should have chosen someone who hadn't already survived one. When I got out of the elevator and came back to the main lobby, the hospital felt weirdly alive. Buzzing with the type of orchestrated urgency that only happens when cameras are present. I sensed something was up before I saw it. The silence in the air was not due to illness. It was about the image. I spotted the platform via the glass partition that separated the main corridor and the media room. A modest banner hung behind it. Community Gratitude Ceremony WakeMed Medical Center. Evelyn stood tall behind the microphone, wearing her normal navy blue blazer. Thomas stood stiffly beside her, his chin up. A live video feed of Lila was displayed on a monitor near them. She was reclining on her hospital bed, an oxygen line beneath her nose, and smiled faintly. I had not been informed that this was happening. Nobody mentioned a news conference. And yet, there they were. Our family's picture-perfect trio. I got closer, just beyond the line of sight, and listened. We are deeply grateful for the anonymous donor, Evelyn remarked, her voice composed and every phrase infused with performance. Because of their generosity and the support of this incredible medical staff, our daughter Lila is alive today. Anonymous. My stomach constricted. Her words went on. This experience has reminded us of the strength of community, of compassion, and the power of love within families. No mention of me. Not even a sideways acknowledgement. They had altered the story again. Thomas stepped forward. It's easy to point fingers during adversity, but true character emerges in silence. We want to focus on healing right now. Not divisiveness. I saw myself disappear in real time. Not a name. Not a single breath. The images on the easel showed Lila smiling, with Thomas by her side. Evelyn held her hand during a treatment. The hospital workers posed in the background. No, Ava. They were burying me in front of a throng with applause. I turned and moved briskly into the west hallway, waiting near the side exit. When the camera turned off and the room cleared, I noticed Evelyn step out first, holding her phone and waving to someone off-screen. I did not wait. I approached her straight, my voice low but distinctive. You knew I was in the building. She did not even flinch. You forfeited the right to be part of this family. The cruelty was no longer masked. I took out my phone and opened a conversation thread with Jenna Cruz, ready to offer her the URL to the live stream recording I had just captured. Evelyn's gaze darted to the TV. What are you doing? Sending evidence, I stated frankly. Because you just erased me on camera. Her hand moved before I realized it. She reached forward and knocked the phone out of my hand. It landed on the floor with a loud crack. People turned. A nurse let out a gasp. One of the volunteers standing nearby took a step forward. Evelyn's chest heaved slightly as she glanced at the smashed phone screen. Her voice quivered, but not from terror. Rage. Do you want to wreck everything? I looked at her without fear or sadness. I was so relaxed that I didn't realize I had left. You already did that for me. I crouched gently, picked up the parts of my phone screen that were spidered and warped, and turned to the security guard who was now hurrying down the hall. He paused alongside me. Ma'am, are you okay? I nodded once and held out what remained of the phone. Please record this as evidence. I'll file a restraining order today. Evelyn's cheeks paled slightly. Not due to guilt, because the performance had ended. The audience stopped clapping. The security guard peered between us. Would you like me to accompany you to the administrative desk? No, I replied. I'll handle it. I strolled by Evelyn, holding my damaged phone like it was sacred, something definitive. The hallway has never felt so long. When I stepped outside into the sunlight, I did not rush. I sat down on the seat near the main door, took out the hospital-issued visiting tablet from my tote bag, and entered into my backup email. Jenna Cruz had already provided me with a tape from the press conference. She had altered it. Labeled the file. Ava erased. Wake Med press event, I typed. They erased my name. But I was going to etch the truth in stone. I pressed send. The conference had concluded. But I had not. Not yet. I strolled directly from the bench outside the hospital to the main building, not even glancing at the volunteers who were still straightening seats from the press event. The air was filled with polite handshakes, light conversation, and someone laughing uncontrollably because they didn't know what else to say. I continued walking. I walked through the automatic doors, past the security checkpoint, and into the elevator without slowing down. I hit the button for the administrative floor and waited. When the doors opened, Dr. Holstrom stood at the end of the corridor, clutching a folder. His demeanor was opaque, yet his eyes contained something deeper than uncertainty, something resembling regret. Thanks for coming up, he said. I didn't want this buried in another inbox. He escorted me into a separate consultation room. No windows. Just a table, 2 chairs, and a faint hum from the overhead light. He sat first. Opened the folder. There's a genetic marker conflict, he explained, folding his hands on the table. We reran everything to make sure. Twice. I did not speak. I knew what was coming. You are not biologically related, he had stated. At all. 6 words. That was all. Nonetheless, the room tilted slightly beneath me. I laughed. Not because of the humor. Something in me cracked open, allowing air to enter. That explains everything, I answered quietly. He nodded gently, as if making room for whatever came next. But I did not cry. I did not gasp. I just sat there, allowing the weight to fall like dust on an ancient box that had finally been opened. Thank you, I replied. I'll need all official documentation, both printed and digital. You'll have them, he said. Would you like to speak to someone? No, I replied. I'm going to talk to everyone. It was already in action. I exited the room, carrying the folder under my arm, and made my way to the main level. By the time I arrived at the media corridor, my heart had stopped racing. It was locked into beat, as if it knew this was the moment I'd been working towards for years. When I reached the side door, security shifted. One of them raised his hand, hesitantly. I'm here to speak, I announced. It won't take long. He took a step back after looking at the badge, which was still clipped to my blouse. Just beyond the entrance, I noticed Jenna Cruz waiting. She didn't grin, instead giving a single knowing nod. "Are you sure?" she asked. "More than I've ever been." The room was still lit, the press was still packing equipment, but the microphones were operational. A couple cameras hadn't turned off yet. I walked to the podium. Nobody stopped me. I set the folder down and opened it. "I won't take your time," I explained. "Just your attention." The entire room came to a standstill. "My name is Ava Monroe. You didn't hear that name at the ceremony today, but it is important." I held up the first sheet of paper. "This is the test result from the National Donor Registry, dated October. It says I am not a match for Lila Monroe." I lifted another. "This is the forged consent form, submitted in my name without my knowledge." And another. "This is a message admitting that Lila knew I wasn't a match, that she hid the result, and that my mother, Evelyn Monroe, deliberately withheld it from the hospital." Flashes went off. Phones were lifted. "I am adopted, I was never told. And I was brought here with the expectation that I could help someone who had spent her entire life watching me bleed and calling it drama." A ripple of loudness spread throughout the throng. They attempted to utilize my body to correct a lie. They removed me from their article, assuming no one would notice. I drew one final breath. I don't want vengeance. I don't want any more stillness. I stepped down from the podium. Evelyn, who was sitting behind me, fainted. The thump was clear. Above the whispers. Thomas attempted to stand and speak, but the murmuring drowned him out. Someone from the hospital staff hurried to Evelyn's aid. Lila's video feed, which was still playing on the back screen, froze and went black. A reporter said, "Do you want justice or revenge?" I only turned back once. "Neither," I replied. "I want to never have to explain myself to them again." And I intended it. I walked out, documents still in my hands, past the astonished audience and the blinking cameras. Nobody tried to stop me, because they could not. It was a calm morning when I returned to my apartment. There are no cameras. No doctors. No one expressed guilt. Only quietness. The internet had already taken the tale, distorted it, and repeated it into headlines. Adopted daughter reveals forged consent in organ donation scandal. Family secrets uncovered on camera. The hospital ethics board has launched an investigation. I did not read the comments section. I did not need to. Evelyn fell during the press event and was taken under medical observation that evening. They reported heart strain, stress-induced. Part of me wondered if it was genuine, or just another layer of act. Thomas had not been seen in public since. There is no formal statement, no apologies. Not that I anticipated it. Lila was discharged. No social media updates. There are no well-lit photographs captioned with Bible scriptures. Only digital quiet. For the first time in my life, I was louder than everyone. That morning, I sat on my small balcony with a cup of black coffee, gazing out at the languid pace of downtown Raleigh. It was the first time in a long time that I did not feel watched. I received a call from the hospital's legal office. They determined that my liver was never a suitable match for Lila's condition. Not marginal. It is not partial. Not even close. Even if I had answered yes, it would not have mattered. It wasn't about saving her. It was all about manipulating me. I thanked them for the call. Politely. Calmly. Then I sank back in my chair, releasing a breath I'd been holding since I was 13. Perhaps earlier. Later, I received another message. This time it's from Lila. "Can we meet? It's just the two of us. Please." I stared at the computer for a moment before typing again. "Where?" she said. "Hospital Garden. The South Path. 5 p.m. At 4:45, I stepped into the garden by myself. The sky was a soft blue-gray, as if it couldn't decide whether to rain or not. Lila was seated on a bench under the birch trees. No makeup. No camera angle. She was dressed simply in a sweater and hospital socks. When I arrived, she did not stand. Instead, she looked up and gestured beside herself. I did. Not sit. After a bit, she spoke. "They only kept you in case I needed something one day." The words struck me like a chilly wind. Not because they astonished me, but because of how calmly she delivered them. "I always thought you knew," she added. "No," I responded. "But I always felt it." She nodded. "Only once. We did not fight. There was nothing left to fight for." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she responded calmly. Good, I replied. Because I'm not offering it. Another pause. The wind blew through the leaves, making them rattle. But I hope you find something better than this, I replied. Because what they did to both of us doesn't deserve to follow us forever. She did not cry. I did not expect her to. I walked away without saying goodbye. Some endings do not require a curtain. I went to the county clerk's office and got the paperwork for a legal name change. Ava Monroe. I kept the moniker I'd created for myself. Not theirs. Not one was donated under obligation. Mine. Walking through downtown Raleigh that afternoon. Things seemed different. The buildings were the same. The people remained the same. But I wasn't. I went to a print shop and signed the final page of the form. I stepped back into the sidewalk and murmured to myself. I didn't need vengeance. I needed the truth. And the truth was always mine. They just attempted to conceal it out of obligation. That night, after supper, I sat at my work and discovered a small envelope in a stack of forwarded mail. There's no return address. Just a postmark from Arizona. Inside, a handwritten note. Hello Ava. I saw your tale. I'm also adopted. I didn't realize I could say no either. Thank you for showing me that it's okay to speak up. I'm 17. You gave me something I had no idea I was entitled to have. Choice. The no signature. Just from someone who realizes she's not alone. I smiled, delicately folded the letter, and placed it in the top drawer of my desk. Not in the evidence file, but in keepsakes. Because it was no longer indicative of pain. It marked the beginning of peace. Some families crumble beneath the weight of their lies. But I've built my life around the truth. This is more than enough. Sometimes the most difficult fact to accept is one we've always suspected. Love may be conditional, and family can disappoint you in ways that leave invisible scars. But quiet does not have to be everlasting. Ava's tale reminds us that speaking up, even if it is difficult, is frequently the first step toward healing. Have you ever been erased by those who are supposed to safeguard you? Let us know in the comments, and remember to subscribe for more true emotional tales like this one. You are not alone, and your story is important. My sister clapped, after Dad slapped me in front of 60 people, then demanded my cabin as I'm childless. I made one silent call. Everything changed. My name is Julia. My sister applauded after our father smacked me in front of 60 people at a family gathering intended to honor our history. She smiled as he said, "Give us the house. You've got no kids." "And my mother?" she asked, laughing, before calling me a barren waste. They spoke it nonchalantly, as if they had been rehearsing it all their lives. However, that wasn't the worst part. The saddest part was learning that this was not their first attempt to erase me. It was the first time they said it out loud. So I made a silent call, just one. Everything they had constructed began to disintegrate. But here's the deal. What kind of family prepares your humiliation as a surprise toast? And what would you do if they demanded everything you constructed because you did not have children to justify it? The email arrived as I was mopping the floor after Finn, my old Shepherd Lab mix, knocked over his water bowl again. My cell phone rang. Kaylin family celebration is a tribute to 10 years of togetherness. This was the topic line. There is no, "Hi Julia, dear family member," or anything personal, simply Vanessa and Travis's blocky email signature at the bottom. It reads like a mass mailer from a real estate company advertising a BBQ and selling a listing. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I did something I haven't done in months. I called my sister. She picked up on the second ring, her voice chirpy as if she were about to laugh. "Sid, how are you? I was just thinking about you." "Hey," I said slowly. "I got your invitation. It didn't have my name on it. Was that just—" "Oh." She cut me off as if I was making a big deal about nothing. "Totally a printing thing. You know how those Evites can be glitchy. Don't overthink it, okay?" She blew past my silence. "It's just going to be a casual backyard thing. Some food. A few speeches, you know. Family love and all that." Family love, correct? I did not say much more. I hung up after exchanging a few pleasantries. I could have said no. I should have said no, but something in me, a need to hope that things could be different, kept me saying yes. I packed the car and departed Asheville. In the back seat was a wrapped gift containing a photo collage I had spent 2 nights creating. It included images from years ago. Vanessa's children as toddlers, our parents when they still looked strong, And even a photo of me and Vanessa from high school, beaming as if we hadn't yet learnt to loathe each other. A hand-sewn cushion sat next to it. My mother made it when her hands could still work the needle precisely. It had been sitting in my guest room for years, waiting for someone to notice. Finn leaped into the passenger seat like he always did, and headed out the window halfway through the trip. It helped me breathe knowing that someone still knew I existed. The party was hosted in Vanessa's house in a Charlotte suburb, and everything appeared to have come from the same catalog. Manicured lawns, houses painted various shades of beige, the type of neighborhood where HOA regulations are displayed like gospel. By the time I arrived, there were perhaps 30 cars lined up outside. I parked down the block and strolled up the sidewalk, holding the box in my arms and nodding to some unfamiliar neighbors. They did not reciprocate the nod. The garden was decorated with white tents and string lights, as well as tables with mason jar centerpieces and printed napkins. A banner above the grill read, "Celebrating the Kalin Legacy, 10 years of growth." I wasn't sure what had grown, but it certainly didn't involve me. A young woman at the welcome table whom I did not know, handed me a badge. "Hi, guest number 18, here you go." I blinked. "I'm Julia, Vanessa's sister." "Oh," she responded, hesitantly. "Sorry, we just went by the list she gave us." Of course they did. I put the badge in my purse and walked in. Conversations whirled around me. Familiar voices discussed soccer leagues, school awards, and new kitchen upgrades. Nobody looked up. Nobody said my name. The photo wall was tough to overlook. 10 feet wide, surrounded by fairy lights. "Kalin Family Memories," it read. There were dozens of photos from Vanessa's wedding, her children's birthdays, Dad fishing with Travis, and Mom celebrating Thanksgiving with a pie I cooked. Except, I wasn't in any of them. Not one. I stood there for longer than I should have, allowing my eyes to hunt for even a speck of my own existence. It was not there. I would as well not have been born. Someone behind me asked quietly, "Is she Vanessa's cousin?" I turned and grinned. "No, just her sister." "You must be." They gave an uneasy laugh and turned away. I went to the present table and sat down in my box. A teenage male, possibly a neighbor's child, swept past and slid it beneath the table, out of sight. Just like that. I noticed my mother near the beverages and approached her. "Hi, Mom." She eyed me up and down. "You made it," she remarked, her voice clipped. Her eyes surveyed the room almost instantly, as if she needed to redirect her focus to someone more important. Dad joined her and nodded to me. No hug, no warmth. "Nice to see you both," I said. Dad nodded again and reached for a Coke. By the time dinner arrived, I was sitting at a folding table behind the speaker stand, next to the portable toilet. No one mentioned my name throughout the talks. Nobody unwrapped the gift. Nobody inquired how I was, what I was doing, or if I was all right. I smiled through every course, toast and phony chuckle. But something inside me began to twist. The sun had set when Vanessa tapped her wine glass, the gentle chime cutting through the din of discussion like a sword. I was seated at a folding table shoved awkwardly against the tent's far side, virtually in the shadows. No one seemed to notice. A portable restroom was located just feet from my chair. The irony did not escape me. As I adjusted in my seat, a young woman in a lilac outfit approached me, most likely recruited by Vanessa for the event, holding a plastic badge. "Here you go," she replied, presenting it to me with a big empty smile. I looked down. The tag said 37. I flipped it over once or twice, wondering whether there was a mistake. Others around me had badges identifying their roles, including Aunt Susan, Uncle Mark, and the Kalin matriarch. Labels that meant something. Identities. Mine felt like a placeholder, a number, an indication that I didn't belong. I slipped the badge inside my purse without comment. There was no use in making a big deal over something so little when the message was already obvious. Across the yard I noticed Rachel Lee. We hadn't seen one another in years. Not since she graduated from high school and moved to California, while I stayed behind to keep our family together. She caught my eye and tilted her head as if to say, "You good?" I gave her a little nod, non-committal yet thankful. Then Vanessa stood. She appeared radiant. I'll admit, she did well in crowds. Her voice flowed naturally, refined by years of socializing and performing. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate the Kalin family legacy," she said, grinning like she was throwing a charity banquet rather than a backyard meal. She began into a well-rehearsed eulogy to our parents, her husband Travis, and their children. She discussed tradition, sacrifice, and building for the future. I knew she'd use language like carry the torch or make our ancestors proud. It was her favorite type of language, high, vacuous, and calculating. She then cast a peek in my direction. There's one more thing we've been meaning to ask. Julia, could you stand with us for a moment? I paused for a brief moment, my palm clenching on the stem of my water glass. Every pair of eyes turned to mine. The clinking of silverware ceased. Even the children stopped fidgeting. I rose slowly, my legs heavier than they should have been, and headed to the center. My heart pounded in my ears. Vanessa beamed that too sweet grin that usually indicated that something was on its way. As you all know, Travis and I are doing everything we can to create lasting memories for our children. We've been saving, dreaming, trying to give them the best childhood possible. And well, Julia has a beautiful cabin up in the mountains. She turned to face the throng, her tone altering to a sugary earnestness that she rarely uses. I opened my mouth, unsure what I was going to say, but Vanessa intervened immediately. We think it would be such a wonderful gesture, such a family-first thing, if she let us use the cabin. You know, made it part of the Kalen legacy. There it was. The muttering began immediately. Gasps and a few supporting claps. Someone said, "That's generous," as if I had already agreed. I looked at my parents. My mother wore the same fixed smile she normally kept for formal occasions. My father gave a faint nod of approval. They were not surprised. They were complicit. My mother then said loud enough for everyone to hear, "It's not like you need it. You don't have a family." It did not come with malice. That was the worst part. It was stated as fact. Something within me split. "No," I responded clearly and unequivocally. Silence swept through the backyard. Everyone's gaze fell on me again, this time with a mix of uncertainty and uneasiness. Vanessa blinked. My father frowned. My mom's smile twitched. "It's not yours," I responded, gazing straight at Vanessa. "And it never will be." The stillness was tangible. For a little moment, even the birds stopped chirping. Vanessa then turned her back on me, indicating to the audience as if nothing had happened. Applause erupted again. But that was not for me. It was for her, for the concept of family togetherness, for the woman who had recently attempted to publicly deprive me of my dignity and possessions. I didn't utter another word. I did not cry. I turned and returned to my table, my purse still clutching the nameless badge and my gift unopened beneath the drink station. I did not touch my plate again. I waited until dessert was served and then quietly excused myself. Nobody stopped me. Nobody asked if I was okay. By the time I got to my car, my hands were trembling not from despair or wrath, but from clarity. Something inside me had cracked, but not in the way they had anticipated. It was not a breakdown, it was a decision. Vanessa did not flinch when I said no. She simply tilted her chin and narrowed her eyes, as if she were trying to figure out why I dared to step out of position. The smile she'd worn seconds before vanished, replaced by a stern line that mirrored the growing tension about the tent. The air became dense, conversations faded into quiet. Everyone held their wine glasses. Some looked at each other, unsure what to do now that someone had broken the script. I stood there straight, not daring to retreat, but not intending to gratify them either. Then I heard Dad's boots on the wooden deck behind me, consistent, hefty. Each step serves as a warning beat. "You've always been ungrateful," he said under his breath. Before I could understand the words, or even brace for impact, his hand cracked across my face, cutting the moment in half. I staggered to the side but did not fall. I blinked hard. My cheek ached, and my flesh was hot from the sting of his palm. My ear rang, but it wasn't the pain that startled me. That was the sound that followed. Applause. It began with Vanessa. One slow, deliberate clap, as if she were cueing the audience. Then, another person joined, and another. Within seconds, the backyard was alive with polite, restrained clapping. Not the kind you hear at a concert, but at a PTA meeting, when someone announces a policy that only benefits a select few. Cautious, social, complicit. I gazed out at the sea of familiar faces, cousins, neighbors, family, and friends. None of them moved to help. Nobody gasped in horror. No one approached me. I pressed my palm to my cheek, not to console myself, but to solidify the moment. Off to the side, I noticed Evan lift his phone and begin recording. Vanessa smiled, her arms crossed gently, as if she had just witnessed an especially well-executed speech. She had it coming, I overheard someone saying near the dessert table. Then Mom stepped forward. Claudette, with her freshly curled hair and floral dress that resembled the cover of a church bulletin. Her voice sounded louder than I expected. "That's why you'll die alone," she explained. "You're just a barren waste." I stared at her, not because I didn't believe her words, but because she didn't blink when she did. It was frigid. It is not theatrical, not even angry. It was simply true in her mind. I did not speak. I did not cry. I did not even blink. I simply looked at her and let the sentence hang in the air like smoke from a house fire. There was nothing more to say to them. Nothing to be heard. Even if I spelled it out letter for letter, they wouldn't admit anything. I turned and walked away. Nobody followed. Rachel Lee seemed to want to. She took a step towards me, but Vanessa shot her a look, a silent reminder that her place was on the side of the clapping. I kept walking past the tables, past the tent poles, past the woman at the badge table who avoided my eyes. By the time I reached the gravel path leading to my car, my face was still burning, but it wasn't from the slap anymore. I opened the door, slid into the driver's seat, and sat there with both hands gripping the steering wheel. My chest was tight, not with panic, not even with rage, but with something colder, sharper. I whispered to myself, "Burn this in your memory." I glanced once in the rearview mirror. My reflection looked not shocked, not devastated. Just done. Finn was in the back seat, already curled up, sensing my shift in energy. I reached for my phone, the contact list popping up with muscle memory. My thumb hovered for a moment. Then I tapped Megan Wolf. She picked up after 2 rings. "Julia, are you okay?" "I need to talk," I said, my voice flat but firm. "About what legal options I have for protecting my property and myself." She didn't hesitate. "I'm here. Whatever you need." I ended the call a few minutes later with a list of action steps and a plan forming in my head like bricks clicking into place. No screaming. No storming back into the party. No pleas for understanding. They had written their own story tonight. My job now was to change the ending. The miles between Charlotte and Asheville rolled by in a blur. I didn't play music, didn't crack a window, just drove, hands steady, eyes fixed. The trees lining the interstate blurred into a muted green wall. The late evening sun cast long shadows across the road like reminders of what I was leaving behind. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the cabin lights were dim, soft, familiar. Finn stirred in the back seat but didn't bark. He knew this energy, knew when my silence meant I needed space, not sympathy. I stepped out, the gravel crunching beneath my shoes. The mountain air was cooler here, cleaner. I breathed in deeply, though it did nothing to soften the edge that had sharpened inside me. When I opened the back door to grab the gift I'd taken to the party, the handmade photo collage and the pillow my mother once claimed to love, I hesitated. It was still neatly wrapped, untouched. I left it in the car. Inside, I dropped my purse on the bench by the door and walked straight to the sink. I removed my earrings one by one, placed them in the small dish I always kept to the left of the faucet. The mirror above the sink reflected my face, but I didn't look up. I didn't want to see the mark or worse, the calm. Instead, I turned on the water, rinsed my face, and let the cold soothe the swelling. My cheek throbbed with a dull ache, but the real wound wasn't physical. It was how easily it had happened, how natural it seemed to everyone else. I dried my face with a towel, then stood still in the quiet of my kitchen. No ticking clocks, no distant voices, just the hum of the refrigerator and the low rustle of Finn settling onto his blanket in the living room. Then my phone buzzed. I picked it up from the counter, expecting another automated alert, or maybe a spam message. But it was from Rachel Lee. I should have said something. "I apologize. What they did was wrong." I stared at the screen. The message wasn't long. No dramatic apology, just honesty. Finally, from someone. I didn't write back, not because I didn't appreciate it, but because it would have cracked something inside me that I needed to keep sealed, at least for now. For the first time since the slap, my hands weren't shaking. I sat down at the edge of the couch, Finn lifting his head slightly before resting it back on his paws. My gaze drifted toward the window, out into the woods behind the cabin. I remembered building this place. Every decision from the layout to the fixtures was mine. No one helped. Nobody asked to. It was my escape when their daughter became too heavy to carry. They never asked how I bought it. Mom never thanked me for the checks I mailed during the pandemic while her prescriptions were delayed. Vanessa never acknowledged that the car she drove was co-signed by me. That's the thing with people like them. They never forget what they've done for you, but anything you do for them is conveniently erased. I thought about my childhood. Vanessa broke her wrist while falling from the swing. and I spent the night with her in the hospital despite Mom's lack of attention. I remembered the birthdays I spent alone while she was away at cheerleading camps, and the years I stayed at the store to assist Dad when Vanessa flew off to her next adventure. All of this felt distant, less painful, and more instructive. I whispered to the air, "They've never seen me angry. That is their mistake." With that, I stood up and approached my desk. The laptop came to life. I entered my password, opened my files, and went to a folder I hadn't looked at in over a year. Family Finance. Personal Records. There were numerous PDFs, bank statements, scanned receipts, and Venmo screenshots, every loan. Vanessa asked me for a favor once, and it was all neatly filed, dated, and documented. I opened one labeled Cabin Transfer Agreement Draft, which Vanessa had asked me to review and suggested I give the cabin in writing for tax efficiency. I never signed it. However, her name was typed in bold in the recipient line. That alone made my stomach turn. Another file. Diane Medical Fund for 2020. It showed a transfer from my account for more than $6,000 when my insurance had expired. Dad said he would reimburse me. He never did, and he never mentioned that he later opened another account in Mom's name, which now appeared suspicious rather than helpful as her memory faded. I sat back and stared at the screen before reaching for my phone again. Megan responded quickly. "Hey, how are you holding up? I think my mother's name is being used on accounts she doesn't understand. I want to find out how deep it goes." There was a pause. Then she asked, "Do you have proof?" "I have more than that," I explained. "I have patterns." She exhaled slowly. "Okay. Then it's time we start a trail. I'll walk you through how to document this for legal review." As we talked, I took notes, flagged files, and started a master document. This was not about vengeance. Not really. It was about defending the truth against a lifetime of well-practiced deceptions. I did not need to scream. I didn't need to throw anything or give a performative monologue online. I just needed proof. And I had more of it than they could possibly imagine. By the next morning, the sting in my cheek had subsided, but the clarity remained razor-sharp. The fog that usually obscured my instincts after family events, second-guessing, guilt, and shame, was gone. All that remained was stillness and a clear sense of purpose. After my first cup of coffee and feeding Finn, I sat down at my desk and reopened my laptop. My plan was not to attack. It was to uncover, then protect. I watched the video clips from the party that guests had quietly recorded and sent to me later. Vanessa gave a casual tour of the backyard's Kaylin legacy table, which piqued my interest more than the others. There it was, my mother's old embroidered table runner. I hadn't seen it for years. It was unmistakable. My initials were stitched in green thread at one end of the cream linen, with delicate vine stitching in the corners. Mom hand-sewed it when I was 17. It was small and discreet. Vanessa beams at the camera. "This is one of Mom's gifts to us. She wanted the kids to have something of hers to pass down." I paused the video. My throat tightened, not from sadness, but from a sense of theft that I had not anticipated. That was my runner. Mom made it for me. I recall the afternoon she handed it to me saying, "You'll have your own place one day and you'll want something familiar." She had intended it. Or maybe she just forgot. I took a screenshot of Vanessa holding the cloth, labeled it "Symbolic Theft," and saved it in a new folder called Kaylin, Active Evidence. Megan called later that morning to provide an update. "You were right," she replied. "There's a credit line opened in your mother's name, $15,000, opened last year, co-signed electronically." My stomach sank. She wouldn't even know how to open her email anymore. That's what makes it problematic. If she doesn't have the cognitive capacity and someone's using her identity, we're looking at potential elder financial abuse. I pressed the phone closer to my ear. It was Vanessa and my father, wasn't it? The co-signing IP address traces back to Richard's home Wi-Fi. We're still confirming more details. "Document everything," I told her, already opening a spreadsheet to record the information. "I want every transaction connected to that account, every name, every dollar." "I'll have our forensic CPA looped in by the end of day," she informed us. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, staring out the window, Finn's tail thumping gently as he rested nearby. I wasn't as angry as I expected to be. Not shouting, not broken. I felt surgically cold but precise. Focused. By mid-afternoon I had written and revised the same email 3 times. Eventually I opted for simplicity. I sent it to Vanessa and Richard. The subject line reads, "Enough. Body. You used her name. You repurposed her memories. You humiliated me in front of people whom I once considered family. If you continue, I will use everything I have and know. This is your final warning. No response, no call, not even a vague apologies. A few hours later, Vanessa shared an Instagram photo of herself and Travis laughing on a porch swing. The caption reads, "Some people believe that family owes them something. They do not." I stared at the screen. She was not even being subtle. They never were. I did not respond. Instead, I printed every file I had, including the bank statements, digital receipts, and video screenshots. I placed them in a hard copy binder and kept it in a locked drawer. I also stored everything on an encrypted cloud drive. Megan had warned me not to let one copy be the only one. That evening, just before dusk, I took Finn for a walk around the perimeter of the property. The air was crisp, the mountain quiet, interrupted only by the rustle of small animals and the creaking of old trees in the wind. I paused at the trail's edge leading to the cabin's back clearing, looked out at the horizon, and whispered something I hadn't said aloud in years. If they cross this line, I won't hold back anymore. It was not a threat, it was a promise. It happened before I had poured my second cup of coffee. I was still in my robe, with Finn nosing around the kitchen, when my phone's voicemail icon flashed. I pressed play with a strange sense of calm, almost as if I already knew. "Hi, this is Michelle from Carolina First Bank. We received a property transfer form regarding the cabin at Blue Laurel Ridge submitted on your behalf yesterday. We just need your verbal confirmation before we finalize the ownership change to Vanessa Kalin." My thumb hovered over the delete button. Instead, I chose save. Within an hour, I was dressed, papers in hand, and ready to go into town. Finn rode with me. He always did this when I needed steel in my spine. I walked into the bank, cool mountain air clinging to my skin, leash in one hand and manila folder in the other. I didn't ask to speak with Michelle. I asked the branch manager. The lobby smelled faintly of pine-scented cleaner and institutional coffee. A receptionist greeted me with a professional smile. 5 minutes later, I was seated across from a middle-aged man in a navy tie who appeared unprepared for the type of conversation I was about to initiate. "There's been an attempt to change ownership of my property," I explained, unfolding the paperwork. "It was not authorized. Here is the original deed. My name, and my signature alone." He cleared his throat. "It says here." The request included a letter of family agreement. "Forged," I said, holding up a copy of my signature next to the one on the submitted form. "I'll compare them," he stated. His expression remained unchanged, but his fingers twitched. "We'll freeze this request immediately," he replied, "and flag the account for any future alterations." "Thank you," I responded, standing. "And please record this internally. This will not be the last time her name appears on your desk." By early afternoon, I was back at home, sitting in front of my laptop. The folder I had previously buried under layers of digital clutter titled, "Family Debt, Do Not Touch," was now front and center. I opened it as if I were opening a vault. The files dated back a decade. Every time Vanessa borrowed money, every emergency bill I paid and every favor I did, I never asked for repayment but never forgot it was there. Itemized with screenshots, bank transfers, text confirmations, receipts for co-signed loans, and notes from when I paid Mom's hospital bills in 2020. Quietly, because it wasn't the appropriate time to discuss money. I made a new Excel file. It's called Kalin Family Facts. There is only one column. Date. Next, consider the amount. Next, consider the recipient. Then comes the description. Then take notes. Emotionally restrained but honest. $12,000 is marked as private down payment assistance. Confidential. That one stood out in my mind. Vanessa begged me not to tell Travis that she couldn't afford the closing costs for their new home. I spent the next hour retrieving documents from emails, online banking, and even old voicemails. It wasn't only about the money, it was about the pattern, behavior, and entitlement that had spread through my family like rot beneath polished wood. When I finished the spreadsheet, I saved it 3 times, on a local hard drive, in an encrypted cloud, and on a flash drive stored in a fireproof box. Then I began making calls. The IRS agent on the phone was polite and attentive. I did not exaggerate. I simply told them what I had discovered. Suspicious income transfers, a lack of repayment, and informal family loans that had never been declared as gifts. Then came Adult Protective Services. I explained Mom's cognitive decline, the account opened in her name, and the financial activity that began around the time her memory deteriorated. Then I called the credit bureau and requested that both my and my mother's accounts be monitored for identity theft. I was not shaking. I was not angry. I was efficient. Precise. By the time the sun began to set behind the ridge, I had photographed everything. My hands were tired and my eyes were dry, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. That evening, Vanessa texted me, "You're overreacting." I stared at it for a few seconds before responding with a single image comparing the forged property transfer to my actual signature. No words. Just the truth. Then Richard called. His voice had the same sharp edge I remembered from childhood, which he used when I dared to speak back. "You're destroying this family, Julia." I took a deep breath and responded flatly. "You did that when you hit me in front of 60 people and applauded the lie." There was silence on the line, then he hung up. I didn't feel victorious, I did not feel guilty either, I felt certain. They had drawn a line. And now I was holding the pen. The next morning, sunlight crept through the trees and landed directly across my kitchen table, where last night's coffee mug sat next to my open laptop. Finn stretched near my feet, his ears twitching from the bird chatter outside. But I remained frozen in my chair, rereading Megan's email sent shortly after midnight. A cease and desist letter was filed and a rebuttal was submitted. I also sent the deed history and tax records to their legal representative for clarification. The silence in my home contrasted sharply with what was going on outside. Vanessa had posted again. This time, a polished photo of her and Travis standing in front of a fake fireplace, arms wrapped around their children. The caption reads, "Family money should be reserved for those who leave legacies, not for those who disappear into the woods with dogs." I stared at the screen without expression. If they wanted to play with fire, I had enough dry brush to start a forest fire. I didn't respond. No cryptic subtweets. There will be no vague moral jabs. Instead, I opened my email and wrote to Megan. "Let them keep talking, we have the truth and the law." An hour later I got a packet in the mail. No signature. There's no return address. Just a white envelope with a printed letter from Vanessa and Richard's attorney. They accused me of holding the cabin in trust for the family. That it had always been viewed as a shared asset rather than a personal one. That I had only managed it temporarily until the family required it for legacy purposes, and now they demanded that I formally transfer it to Vanessa. It took everything I had not to laugh. Instead, I scanned and sent the document to Megan. She replied almost immediately. "We recommend that your client review actual property deeds before making baseless claims." I leaned back and exhaled slowly. These weren't emotional outbursts anymore. These were tactics that had been measured and practiced. They were attempting to use public relations to force a legal decision. I checked the cabin's exterior cameras. I installed them myself following a break-in scare in the winter. Nothing elaborate, just enough to see the driveway and porch. The video history loaded smoothly, and I looked at the timestamps. Vanessa and Evan were both present. Unannounced. Uninvited. He arrived in his black SUV. Evan carried a briefcase. Vanessa wore the dress she had saved for Sunday brunches she would never pay for. They walked around the porch, peering through the windows, and my breath caught. They opened the door with a key. I paused the feed, leaned forward and scrolled through the footage. They stood in the kitchen next to a man dressed in a gray blazer and carrying a small suitcase. He opened it. Notary stamp. I zoomed in. Evan put documents on the counter. Vanessa pointed. He stamped one of the pages. Vanessa signed. Evan signed. Then they left. No call. There was no advance notice. There is no legal right. I downloaded the footage, backed it up and sent it to Megan with a note that they had trespassed and forged legal signatures with a notary present. "It's time to make this public." She did not need to be told twice. The video was shared with the State Bar Association, the Secretary of State's office, and a trusted reporter from a local affiliate. It began to unravel. My inbox was filled with messages, some hateful, some apologetic, and a few anonymous. One person said, "You should be ashamed. You're ruining your parents' lives." I read it 3 times. Then for the first time, I posted this publicly. Abuse does not cease to exist simply because it takes place behind smiles and casseroles. Silence is not love, it's complicated. The post caught fire. People started to comment. Strangers. Friends. Even former classmates. Others shared their own experiences with inheritance manipulation, forced family property transfers, and gaslighting disguised as tradition. The hashtag #Kaylin Cabin conspiracy began trending. Vanessa's influencer partnerships gradually faded. One brand made an announcement: "We have put our relationship with Mrs. Kaylin on hold while we seek legal clarification." That night I went for another walk with Finn. The sky was deep indigo, and the wind moved through the trees as if it knew everything. I did not feel triumphant. I felt clean, as if a wound had been cut open and finally allowed to bleed. They attempted to take me home. I took back the truth. Now it was time to face the consequences. When the video arrived in Lily Rose's inbox, I was outside clipping dead branches off the blueberry bushes near the shed. My phone vibrated against the porch rail every few minutes, but I ignored it. I'd accomplished my goal of exposing the truth, and now I was letting gravity take care of the rest. Lily had messaged me once quietly after the party. I did not clap, she had written. I just froze. I apologize. I hadn't responded then. I didn't need an apology. I required action. Apparently, she understood as well. The clip she posted to Reddit was 27 seconds long, just enough to capture the sound of the slap, my stunned expression, Vanessa's hands coming together in slow, deliberate applause, and then the crowd. Some laugh. Some people nod. Nobody intervenes. Her caption was direct. It was a family reunion. This was how they treated their youngest daughter. It did not take long. The video received over 300,000 views. It surpassed 1 million. Barren waste began to trend across platforms, both ridiculously and outrageously. People shared it, with reactions ranging from disgust to disbelief. Talk shows began calling. Commentators dissected each frame. What type of family believes this is normal? I didn't speak with the press. I did not give interviews. I did not even tweet. I let the story stand on its own. Without embellishments. That was the part they didn't understand. Truth does not require spin. It only needs oxygen. Meghan called with her usual calmness. The State Attorney General's office has opened an investigation into Diane's financial accounts. The forensic team discovered several authorizations signed following her dementia diagnosis. The IRS is halting Vanessa's refund processing. Richard has been subpoenaed. She paused. A court hearing is scheduled. I nodded slowly, but she couldn't see me. CPS also conducted a wellness check at Vanessa's home. Apparently, the property had already been flagged last year. It's now part of a larger file. And Evan's 2 brand contracts were terminated. One-sided violation of moral conduct clauses. I leaned back in the chair near the cabin window, the tea cooling beside me. Finn lay stretched out on the rug, his ears twitching as I exhaled. The wind through the pines sounded like waves, quiet but relentless. Vanessa attempted to reclaim the narrative. She went live on her platform while sitting cross-legged in her tastefully decorated living room. She's always been jealous, Vanessa said into the camera, her voice soft but quivering. We were just trying to honor our family's legacy, but some people twist everything. I watched it from beginning to end. The comment section quickly lit up, not with sympathy, but with screenshots of tax forms, property deeds and bank transfers from years ago that had somehow made their way online. Someone who has access to the truth has anonymously uploaded it. Someone had my back. Someone had seen enough. Public opinion turned against her in real time. Your sister helped you get out of foreclosure. She paid your mother's bills. You applauded when your father hit her. I sipped my tea and watched it all unfold. I did not delete the hateful comments either, which called me selfish, dramatic, and bitter. Let them stay. Let them demonstrate that not everyone understands boundaries. Let the light shine on the roaches. I received an envelope from the county clerk's office. Inside was a formal request. Would I be the legal guardian of Diane Kalin? I stared at it for a long time, but not because I was torn. I was not. I picked up the pen and wrote, I'm not her guardian. I am her daughter. And that wasn't enough for her. I signed my name, folded the form, and mailed it the same day. The court placed her in the custody of a state-appointed facility 2 counties away. As next of kin, I received regular updates. However, I did not make a visit. I was not cruel. I simply chose to stop bleeding for those who would have left me to die of thirst. I walked along the edge of my property. Finn trotting beside me. The dew had lifted. The air smelled like pine and soil. The sky, clear and uninterrupted, stretched infinitely above us. I stood at the top of the ridge behind the cabin, allowing the wind to wash over me without regard for symbolism or healing metaphor. Simply because it felt clean. Honest. And for once in my life, the silence was not lonely. It was earned. It had been several weeks since the last email, phone call, or legal letter. At that point, the chaos had transformed into something unfamiliar. Quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't throb or press, but spreads out like a thick blanket after a long, harsh storm. I spent my mornings walking along the property's edge. The trees had not changed. But I did. The same gravel pathways. The same rocking chair on the porch. However, something in the way I moved through them had changed. I no longer checked my phone mid-step or anticipated which name would appear on the screen. Richard had become silent. Vanessa's social media accounts had been either deleted or suspended. I hadn't checked because I wasn't interested in knowing. Diane's recipe requests and photo dumps of her grandchildren had slowed down the family group chat. Nobody sent anything anymore. The last message was a generic Happy Father's Day from a cousin who had no idea, or chose not to know, what had happened beneath the Kalin name. There was no triumph in the silence. There is no celebration. Just the realization that I had finally stopped pretending. The documents confirming the cabin's sole ownership have arrived. Thick envelope, official seal, notarized, indexed, final. I slowly opened it, brushing the gold embossed lettering as if it would vanish. It did not. It was real. The house was still mine. No more threats. There are no more gray areas. Megan texted a simple, "It's done." The IRS had completed its audit. Vanessa was flagged for unreported gifts. Richard had been cited for improper account use involving Diane's medical funds. The fine alone could have paid for my entire mortgage. Diane had been assigned to a long-term care facility in Winston-Salem. A quiet, state-funded facility that is not glamorous but runs smoothly. I was invited to visit, or at least sign her intake paperwork in person. I agreed to drive down. I did not go inside. I parked in the visitor's lot and watched a nurse wheel an elderly woman through the garden paths. It was not Mom, but it could have been. Instead, I approached the front desk and handed over a small parcel. Inside was the embroidered cloth that Vanessa had claimed at the party, which my mother had sewn with my initials years before. I've included a note. It was always yours and mine. The receptionist accepted it without question, most likely because she was used to such situations. Offerings from daughters who loved, but were unable to return. I returned home that evening and stood in the kitchen as the kettle began to hum. I poured 2 cups of tea, one for myself and one for whoever I was becoming. Finn padded over to sit beside me, as he always did. Patient. Ever knowing. His eyes met mine, and I swear he felt it too. Something deeper than relief. Something closer to reclamation. 3 women arrived in the cabin. Their names were Karen, Beth, and Marissa. They were members of a local support group with which I had begun volunteering, helping women rebuild after being quietly erased by their own people. Widows, daughters, mothers who had been forced out of the homes they had helped build. We spent our weekend hiking, baking, crying, and laughing. They did not inquire about my story directly. But they knew. And I knew theirs. That marked the beginning of something new. It's not a program or a nonprofit. It's just a space. A community for women like me. People who had been invisible until they decided not to be. I did not make it public. I did not advertise. I didn't post any photos. It was invitation only, and every woman who walked up my porch steps knew she was finally safe. In the evenings, after the guests had gone to bed, I sat on the deck, a blanket over my lap and a journal in hand. I didn't destroy them. I just wrote one night. I simply stopped protecting their version of the truth. There was no bitterness left in the ink, only a clean line beneath a lengthy sentence. When I closed the journal and returned inside, the cabin smelled of cinnamon and cedar. Finn was curled up beside the fireplace, his breathing soft and steady. I sank into the armchair by the window, the firelight dancing across the wooden beams above. Outside, the wind blew gently across the ridge, brushing against the trees like a lullaby. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for peace. I'd taken it. Sometimes the loudest strength is found in a quiet refusal to be erased, used, or to continue pretending that blood alone makes someone a family member. This story is not just about vengeance. It's about reclaiming your voice when others try to silence it, as well as understanding that forgiveness does not always bring peace. Sometimes it comes from simply walking away. What would you do if your family crossed that line? If you enjoyed this story or found it thought-provoking, please like, comment, and subscribe. More authentic, raw, and powerful family stories are on their way. You had her first? I asked. It was just 3 dates. Then I found out he spent all of my trust fund with my parents' help, so I sued them all. I, a 32-year-old man, never expected to be writing one of these Reddit posts, but I need to get this off my chest before I lose my mind. First, some background information. I grew up in Michigan as the oldest of 3 children. I worked hard in school, got into Michigan State for computer engineering, and landed a good tech job in Chicago after graduation. I worked there for nearly a decade before accepting a higher-paying remote position that allowed me to relocate back to my hometown in Michigan 2 years ago. The money was too good to pass up, with a $45,000 salary increase and stock options already worth another $30,000. Tyler, my younger brother and 29-year-old male, has always been my mother's favorite. Not in subtle ways either. She's outright about it. Tyler received his first car on his 18th birthday, whereas I had to work summer jobs to afford it. When I needed assistance with college tuition, I received lectures on financial responsibility. Tyler wanted to start a business, a food truck selling overpriced tacos, which failed spectacularly in 8 months and cost my parents $85,000. They drained their savings to fund it. The pattern was established early. When we were kids, I would be grounded for leaving my bike out in the rain. Tyler crashed his bike into our neighbor's garden, destroying $500 worth of exotic plants, and my mother blamed the neighbor for planting too close to the sidewalk. I remember her writing that check with a martyred expression and then taking Tyler out for ice cream to cheer him up after the trauma. Do not get me wrong. I created my own life and did well for myself as a senior software architect, earning 6 figures and owning a nice condo. I've put most of the family drama behind me. My sister Jenna, a 27-year-old woman, gets it. She is a nurse who paid her own way through school while experiencing the same favoritism that I did. She worked night shifts at a 24-hour diner throughout nursing school, returning home to study at 4 a.m., while Tyler slept off parties in our parents' basement. Jenna and I have a monthly video call to talk about family drama. These sessions usually conclude with us placing bets on Tyler's next catastrophic life decision. Last month, I won $50 by predicting that he would try to become a day trader after watching a YouTube video about it. He lost $3,000 in 2 days. Mason, my best friend and 32-year-old male, has been by my side since we were 12 years old. We met in middle school when he confronted a teacher who had given me detention for something I did not do. Mason noticed Tyler was the one throwing the paper airplanes, but when caught, he blamed me. Mason stood up and pointed at Tyler, saying, "It was that kid. Albert's just covering for him because that's what he always does." Mason was also detained, but we've been inseparable ever since. Mason's razor-sharp sarcasm cuts through nonsense faster than anything. He works as a mechanical engineer for a defense contractor and is never afraid to point out when someone is being an idiot, especially when it comes to my family. He's been telling me for years that I shouldn't try to get my parents' approval. I should have listened sooner. Mason and I play basketball every Saturday morning, and we destroy college kids half our age using pure strategy and dirty tricks. He refers to it as old man ball. There are fewer jump shots, more elbows, and trash talk. The true competition is our post-game discussion about which of our families is more dysfunctional. His father left when he was 8, and his mother went through boyfriends like seasonal wardrobes, so it's usually a close call. About a year after returning, I met Rachel, a 30-year-old woman, at a downtown tech meetup. She was presenting on digital marketing strategies for B2B clients. Smart as hell, doesn't take nonsense from anyone, and has a dry sense of humor that kills me. She made 3 excellent Star Wars references during her presentation, so I had to introduce myself afterwards. We hit it off right away. 6 months in, things became serious. Rachel grew up with 4 brothers in a household that valued directness over politeness. When she first met Mason, they spent 2 hours arguing about the technical feasibility of lightsabers, while I simply watched in amusement. She holds a black belt in jiu-jitsu, which she earned after a creep followed her home from college one night. She is not someone to mess with, which makes what happened later all the more insane. I did not immediately mention Rachel to my family. Given our history, I keep my personal life separate from family matters until I'm certain of things. By Christmas, I had decided it was time for them to meet her. I reasoned, what could go wrong? That's when everything collapsed. I showed my parents pictures of Rachel, and when Tyler saw her, he lost it, screaming about how I was a jerk for dating his ex. I had no idea they knew each other, let alone dated. Tyler and Rachel had reportedly gone on a few casual dates 3 months before I met her. According to him, she ended an intense relationship abruptly. He did the classic Tyler move, stomping upstairs and slamming his bedroom door as if he were 14, not 29. My mother immediately gave me that disappointed expression she had perfected over the years. When I asked Rachel about it later, she told me the truth. They only went on 3 dates and she ended it when he became possessive after barely knowing her. On their 3rd date, he suggested she meet his parents and discussed a weekend getaway to Chicago. When she complained that things were moving too quickly, he showed up at her workplace with flowers the next day. That was the last straw. I refused to break up with Rachel over this nonsense. Tyler kept bringing it up for weeks, telling anyone who would listen that I had stolen his girlfriend. My mother began making passive-aggressive remarks about family loyalty whenever Rachel's name was mentioned. Tyler eventually stopped mentioning it, and I believed we could all move on. I was completely wrong. Rachel and I had been together for about 15 months and I knew she was the one. I planned a lavish proposal for her birthday, reserved a private room at her favorite restaurant, invited both of our families and close friends, and spent 3 months' salary on the perfect ring. The proposal went perfectly. She said yes. Everyone cheered. It was one of the most enjoyable nights of my life. Well, almost everyone cheered. Tyler stormed out during the applause, and my mother followed him like a toddler throwing a tantrum. She glared at me as she walked out, as if I had proposed to ruin Tyler's evening. My father simply shrugged apologetically and continued to celebrate. Later that night, Mason approached me and said, "Your mom literally chased after a 29-year-old man who was throwing a fit about someone else getting engaged. Think about how insane that is." Mason's way of putting it was both hilarious and disturbing. Tyler remained quiet for about 2 months after that. He rarely spoke to me, which was fine with me. Then, out of nowhere, he invited Rachel and me to dinner at his house with my parents and sister, stating that he wanted to clear the air before the wedding. We accepted because my parents and Jenna would be present to act as buffers. Jenna had texted me beforehand. "Suspicious timing. Do you want me to bring my taser?" I assumed she was joking. It turns out we should have been even more prepared. Dinner was tense, yet uneventful. My mother kept asking Rachel pointed questions about her family and career goals, implying that marketing was not as serious as Tyler's perpetual entrepreneurship. Rachel handled it like a pro, even complimenting my mother on her hideous new haircut with a perfectly straight face. After that, we all went to the living room for coffee. Tyler stood up about half an hour into the conversation to make an important announcement. He gave a long, dramatic speech about how happy he was to have everyone there for his special occasion. Then, I still can't believe he got down on one knee, took out a ring box, and proposed to my fiancée. The room went completely silent. Rachel looked horrified and told him to put the ring away and stand up. My dad attempted to intervene, but I was already across the room. I grabbed Tyler's shirt collar and punched him squarely in the jaw. He fell back and knocked over the coffee table. Tyler began spewing delusional nonsense about Rachel only being with me to get back at him for dumping her, proving she didn't truly love me. My mother screamed at me for hitting her precious son, completely ignoring what he had just done. Jenna got Rachel and me out of there before things worsened. Rachel was furious in the car. She could not believe Tyler would do something like that in front of our families. When we returned home, I examined the damage to my hand. Rachel paced the kitchen, her knuckles bruised but not broken. "I went on 3 dates with him, Albert." 3. "And he does this a year and a half later? Who does that?" I didn't know the reply. Logic does not apply in Tyler's world. It has been a week since then, and I am still seeing red. My parents have been blowing up my phone, mostly defending Tyler and claiming I overreacted. My mother even had the audacity to suggest that I apologize for punching him. "He's sensitive and was just expressing his feelings," she had texted. "Violence is never the answer." I replied, "Neither is proposing to your brother's fiancée." I ultimately decided to confront Tyler directly. I called him and insisted Rachel be present during the conversation. He unexpectedly agreed, and we met at my house the next weekend. When Tyler arrived, he appeared to be in rough shape. He sat silently for a few minutes until I asked him to explain himself. "Look, it's not what you think," he said. "What point could possibly justify proposing to my fiancée?" I asked him. He explained that he had been talking to his friend Craig about Rachel and me. Craig had convinced himself that Rachel had started dating me solely to exact revenge on Tyler for rejecting her. They devised this test to see if she would leave me for Tyler if given the opportunity. Craig is Tyler's equally delusional friend from college. He's the one who convinced Tyler that cryptocurrency was a surefire investment just before the market crashed. He is also the marketing expert who created Tyler's food truck logo, which was a cartoon taco that appeared disturbingly anatomical. Their combined IQ barely approaches room temperature. Craig said if she was using you to get back at me, she'd either say yes to my proposal, or at least be flattered by it, Tyler told me. The fact that she was disgusted proved she might actually love you. Rachel was furious. "So you humiliated all of us to prove a point? You realize how insane that is, right?" Tyler shrugged. "I had to know for sure," Craig said. "Craig's a 30-year-old who lives in his mom's basement," I said. "Maybe don't take relationship advice from him." The conversation deteriorated from there. Tyler claimed that his actions were justified because bros before hoes were his exact words. He stated that if the situation had been reversed, he would have backed off and followed the code. I knew it was complete nonsense. Tyler announced before leaving that he would not be attending our wedding. I can't support this marriage knowing I had her first. 3 dates isn't having someone first, you idiot, I commented to him. And don't worry, your invitation was already in the shredder. After he left, I called my parents and explained what had happened. My father seemed to understand the situation, but my mother continued to make excuses for Tyler's behavior, claiming it was a misunderstanding and that we were being too harsh on him. He's always been sensitive, and he really liked Rachel. You should have checked with him before you started dating her, she stated. We went on 3 dates about 1.5 years ago, Rachel said, loud enough for my mother to hear over the phone. I barely knew him. My mother hung up after that. Jenna called later to say she was completely on our side and thought Tyler's behavior was unacceptable. I've been saying it for years, Mom created a monster. Good luck getting her to see it though. For the time being, I've decided to maintain minimal contact with Tyler and my parents. Rachel and I concentrated on moving forward with wedding planning. Despite the fact that family drama was overshadowing what should have been a happy time, Mason came over that weekend with pizza and a PlayStation. Wedding planning break, he announced. You need to shoot some virtual bad guys instead of your actual brother. He was not wrong. About a month later, the situation flared up again at my sister Jenna's promotion celebration dinner. My parents hosted it at their home, and Tyler was conveniently unavailable that evening. Jenna was recently promoted to charge nurse in the ER. During dinner, she mentioned her upcoming trip to Europe and casually said, Albert, I know. Tyler isn't invited to your wedding, but you'd be fine with him coming to my birthday party next month, correct? I laughed it off and told her it was her party and guest list. My mother, who had been silently fuming all night, finally snapped. Is Tyler really still uninvited to your wedding? I thought you were just being dramatic. I confirmed that he was still uninvited. She began ranting about how I was being childish and harboring grudges. I reminded her that Tyler and I had agreed he would not attend. She accused me of attempting to divide the family and claiming I was envious of Tyler's charisma. What charisma? The guy wears graphic tees with crypto slogans and hasn't worked a real job since college. His idea of witty conversation is to quote Joe Rogan podcasts. My mother, on the other hand, sees him as a cross between George Clooney and Elon Musk. I bit my tongue and told her that this was not the time or place to discuss it. We were there to celebrate Jenna. My mother stormed off to the kitchen, and the rest of the evening was awkwardly silent. My father attempted to salvage the evening by asking Jenna detailed questions about her new role. But the damage had been done. 3 days later, my mother arrived at my house unexpectedly. Rachel was working from home, and I'd just returned from a meeting. Mom barged in without an invitation and demanded that we resolve the Tyler situation once and for all. She launched into a bizarre lecture about how I should be secure enough in my relationship to not be concerned about Tyler's harmless prank for the proposal. She said that not inviting him was cruel and petty and that I needed to be a better person. I reminded her that Tyler and I had both agreed he should not come. If she had a problem with it, she should tell him. This resulted in a shouting match in which she eventually dropped the bomb. If Tyler's not welcome, then I'm not coming either. That's your choice, I said calmly. I'm not going to beg you to be at my wedding. She looked shocked, as if she expected me to cave right away. Would you really be okay with your mother missing your wedding? It wouldn't be the first important event of mine you've missed because of Tyler, would it? That struck home. She had missed my college graduation because Tyler had a minor cold. She missed my first professional award ceremony because it coincided with Tyler's community theater performance. He played tree number 3 with no lines. She called me cruel and stormed out. Within hours, my phone was inundated with texts and calls from her side of the family, aunts, uncles and cousins, all telling me I was being unreasonable and that I needed to respect my mother. Later in the evening, my father called me privately. Son, I think your mother is wrong on this one. Tyler was out of line and actions have consequences. I'll be at your wedding, regardless of what she decides. This was the first time my father had openly disagreed with my mother regarding Tyler. I was genuinely surprised. Perhaps he was finally developing a spine after 35 years of marriage. Meanwhile, Tyler began posting cryptic social media updates about family betrayal and blood means nothing anymore. My mother left supportive comments on all of Tyler's posts, adding to the drama. He even made a public playlist titled Songs for Traitors, which featured mostly whiny emo tracks from 2005. Rachel got caught in the middle. My mother had been texting her directly, attempting to guilt her into changing my mind. When Rachel did not respond, my mother began spreading rumors that Rachel was manipulating me and turning me against my parents. For the time being, the majority of my mother's family was boycotting the wedding, while my father's side continued to plan to attend. Jenna reaffirmed her commitment to attend despite the drama. We decided to downsize the wedding because our guest list had been nearly halved. The silver lining was that we saved nearly $15,000 on the venue and catering, which we put towards a more luxurious honeymoon in New Zealand. My mother showed up unannounced at our house again. Rachel texted me at work, saying my mother was at the door and wanted to talk. I told Rachel that I'd be home in 20 minutes and that she could come in if she felt comfortable. When I arrived, they were seated at the dining table. My mother had barely touched the coffee Rachel had made her. The tension in the room was palpable. My mother started with what appeared to be an olive branch. "I've been thinking about everything, and I want to clear the air. Family is too important to let this drive us apart." For a brief moment, I believed she might actually apologize. Instead, she turned to Rachel and said, "I had hoped to catch you alone today. I believe that without Albert's influence, you would understand why Tyler is in this situation." Rachel responded calmly, "With all due respect, I wouldn't discuss this without Albert present. This includes his brother and his family." My mother's face darkened. "Do you need permission to speak now? I thought you were supposed to be independent." I stepped in. "That's enough, Mom. If you came here to insult Rachel, please leave right now." She ignored me and continued to address Rachel. "You know, before you came along, our family was just fine. Albert suddenly thinks he's too good for us. I wonder where he got that idea." "Before I came along," Rachel replied with impressive restraint. "Albert was already a successful professional who'd built his own life despite, not because of, his family's support." Rachel stood up. "I think you should leave. We can talk when everyone is calmer." That's when my mother completely lost it. As Rachel approached the door, my mother grabbed her by the hair and yanked her backward. Rachel stumbled and fell, and in seconds my mother was on top of her, screaming incoherently and attempting to scratch her face. I physically removed my mother from the house. She pounded on the door for nearly 10 minutes before finally exiting. Rachel was shaken, but not seriously injured, with scratches, a bruised arm, and a small patch of hair pulled out. I immediately called my father and Jenna to explain what had happened. My father was shocked, but he still tried to make excuses. "Your mother's been under a lot of stress lately." "So have I said. "Somehow I've managed not to assault anyone." Jenna, who has seen many domestic violence cases as a nurse, came over right away to check on Rachel and strongly advised us to file a police report. "This isn't normal family conflict," she insisted. "This is assault." Rachel was hesitant to involve the police, but she agreed to file a report after we explained why having an official record could be useful if things escalated further. The responding officers explained that even if Rachel did not press charges, the case could be pursued based on the evidence. They also suggested that we consider a restraining order. One of the officers approached me while Rachel was giving her statement. "Look, I'm constantly dealing with family disputes. This isn't typical heated argument territory. Your mother crossed a serious line." He gave me a card for a family law attorney who specializes in restraining orders. Tyler was surprisingly absent throughout the drama. I texted him to tell him what happened, and all he said was, "That's messed up. Sorry." No defense of our mother. No attempt to shift blame. Just a simple admission that she had crossed a line. I called Mason after everything had gone down. He drove over with food from our favorite burger restaurant and listened to the entire story. After I finished, he simply shook his head. "Dude, I've been telling you for 15 years that your mom is nuts. Perhaps now you'll believe me." He helped me write a no-contact email to my mother. The email was brief and to the point. "I'm cutting off contact with you after your physical attack on Rachel. Don't come to our house. Please do not contact us by phone, email, or through third parties. Any future communications will go through our attorney. This is not negotiable." I blocked my mother on all platforms, told my father I wouldn't speak to her again until she sought professional help, and offered a genuine apology to Rachel. We seriously considered moving out of state following the wedding. Rachel had been offered a position in her company's Atlanta office, and my job was already remote. A fresh start 600 miles from this toxic family environment sounded appealing. The next day, Rachel and I went to court and requested a temporary restraining order against my mother. The judge granted it right away based on the police report and photographs. My mother was legally barred from coming within 500 feet of us or our home for the next 90 days. What I haven't mentioned yet is the financial side of all this family drama. My grandfather died, leaving a substantial inheritance to his 3 grandchildren, Tyler, Jenna, and me. My parents were named trustees until we reached 30 or married, whichever came first. My grandfather was an astute businessman who established a chain of hardware stores throughout the Midwest. He sold the company for 8 figures several years before his death. Each of us grandkids was supposed to receive approximately $450,000, plus proceeds from some investment properties that he owned. I never saw much of the money. Whenever I inquired about it, my parents provided excuses for why it could not be accessed or claimed. Most of it went to family expenses. Jenna had the same experience. Following the assault, I became more concerned with the trust situation. I asked for bank statements and transaction records, which my parents were legally required to provide as trustees. What I discovered was infuriating, but not surprising. They had been systematically using trust funds, primarily mine and Jenna's, to fund Tyler's lifestyle and failed business ventures. His apartment costs $2,300 per month in rent, which is paid with trust funds. His car, a $42,000 SUV purchased outright with trust funds. His failed food truck business received $85,000 from the trust. His custom gaming PC cost $5,500 from the trust. Meanwhile, I had received exactly $15,000 for educational expenses. Jenna received $12,000 over 5 years from a trust that was supposed to provide each of us with nearly $500,000. The paper trail was damning. Tyler's personal checking account receives $4,000 in automatic transfers from the trust account each month for living expenses. He makes regular payments on his credit cards, car insurance, cell phone, streaming subscriptions, and even dating app premium memberships. I sought advice from an estate law expert. He confirmed my suspicions that my parents had violated their fiduciary duty as trustees by clearly favoring one beneficiary over the others and using the trust for purposes not intended by my grandfather. With Jenna's full support, I filed a civil lawsuit against my parents for breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of funds, and violation of trust terms. The documentation was irrefutable. Bank transfers, credit card statements, and rental agreements all show precisely where the money went. When the lawsuit papers were served, chaos ensued. My father called, his voice filled with panic. "Albert, we need to discuss this. There has been a misunderstanding." "The bank records are pretty clear, Dad," I explained. "No misunderstanding." My mother abruptly answered the phone, sweet as honey. "Sweetheart, we always intended to repay the money. We were just assisting your brother through a difficult period." "A 5-year rough patch?" I asked. "Besides, it was not your money to lend. Grandpa left it specifically for us." The civil lawsuit turned out to be a tactical nuclear option. My lawyer, a former prosecutor who specialized in financial crimes, approached the case as a personal crusade. He discovered that my parents had not only misappropriated funds, but also altered some of the annual trust reports that they were legally required to file. The lawsuit had a significant financial impact. Their assets were temporarily frozen while the case was pending, so they couldn't continue to support Tyler. Their credit score plummeted after the court case became public record. My father, who had planned to retire next year, had to postpone those plans indefinitely. My mother had to return to work as a receptionist at a dentist's office, a position she considers beneath her. They had to withdraw from their country club because they could no longer afford the fees. The entire situation was quietly discussed in their social circle. Nobody said anything directly, but they no longer received invitations to the fancy dinner parties they used to brag about. It turns out that embezzling from your own children won't make you popular among the other golf club parents. Tyler's rent was due, his car payment was late, and his credit cards were maxed out. Tyler, for the first time in his life, had to face real consequences. He couldn't get new credit cards or loans because his current debt was too high, and he had no income history. His electricity was turned off for 3 days in the middle of winter because he couldn't pay his bill. Tyler called me. "Look, man, I know we've had our disagreements, but I'm in a serious bind here. Could you lend me some money until this blows over? I will pay you back." "Sorry, no," I said. "My finances are tied up in legal fees recovering what was stolen from me and Jenna. Come on, I'm about to be evicted. This sounds like a problem that you should solve on your own. Target is hiring." The silence on the other end was deafening. And he hung up. Rachel and I had a smaller, more intimate wedding with 50 guests instead of 200. My father attended the event alone and remained respectful throughout. Jenna was with her boyfriend. Tyler and my mother were nowhere to be seen, just as planned. Mason was my best man, and he kept things light despite everything. His toast included a line about how he'd never seen a man dodge so many bullets from his own family while still coming out on top. Everyone who was aware of the situation laughed more than they probably should have. The court case was settled before going to trial. My parents agreed to a structured repayment plan that would not make them homeless, but would require them to sell their vacation home and significantly downsize. Their lakefront home in northern Michigan sold for less than they paid for it. They had to downsize from their 4,000 square foot house to a 1,200 square foot condo in a neighborhood they used to mock. My father's prized boat was one of the first things they had to sell to cover the initial costs. A neutral third-party trustee was appointed to manage the remaining trust funds, with strict distribution guidelines in place. Because I was over 30 and married, the new arrangement guaranteed that I would receive my entire share right away. Jenna would receive hers when she turned 30 in a few years. Tyler's portion would be held in trust until he turned 30, or demonstrated proof of legitimate employment for at least 12 consecutive months. Tyler was furious when he learned that he would not have immediate access to his inheritance. "That money is rightfully mine," he told me via text. "1/3 of it is," I explained. "And you'll get it according to the original terms of Grandpa's will for education, legitimate business plans with oversight, or when you turn 30. No more blank checks." After the judge approved the settlement, my share was immediately released. It was surreal to see so much money in my account. $397,000 after legal fees and taxes. Jenna would receive roughly the same when she turned 30. The remainder of the trust, including Tyler's portion, was worth about $450,000, with some of it set aside to repay what my parents had already spent. The first thing I did was pay off the mortgage. The second goal was to fund Rachel and my 2-week honeymoon in New Zealand, including all expenses and first-class flights. The third step was to create my own investment portfolio, which my grandfather would have approved of. I did not mention the money to Tyler. As far as he knew, everything was still caught up in legal proceedings. Allow him to sweat a little longer. It's been 6 months since the lawsuit was settled, and we moved to Atlanta as planned. Rachel is thriving in her new role, and I have been promoted to lead architect at my company. We purchased a house in a nice suburb and are now enjoying some peace and quiet. Our new home has everything we wanted, including 4 bedrooms, a finished basement, and a backyard large enough for a dog. We named our German Shepherd Mix Rocket after adopting him from the local shelter. He's as smart as hell and already understands a dozen commands. Rachel jokes that he is the best listener in my family. My parents have been sending emails and texts almost every day, alternating between apologies, updates on Tyler's progress, and not-so-subtle hints that they'd like to visit Atlanta someday. I respond occasionally but set firm boundaries. We were supposed to renew the restraining order before moving, but we didn't because we're now several states away. My father calls me once a month, usually to update me on their tight but manageable finances and his slow but steady progress in therapy. He's learning to recognize his enabling patterns and establishing boundaries with my mother and Tyler. Tyler has proven to be the most surprising development. With his financial safety net gone, he landed a job at a local technology store. Jenna, who still talks to him on occasion, says he's sticking with it. Working regular hours and earning his own money appears to be changing his mindset. Last month he sent me an unexpected email. "I've been thinking about everything. That proposal nonsense was messed up, and I see it now. It wasn't even about Rachel. I was just jealous that you had your life together while I was a complete mess. Mom and Dad made it far too easy for me to make mistakes, which I took advantage of. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that things are different when you're not in fantasy land. Working actual hours for real pay has been eye-opening. Tell Rachel I apologize for being a jerk. You didn't deserve any of it." I did not answer promptly. I needed time to process it. After discussing it with Rachel, I sent a brief response. "Thanks for the apology. It means something. Good luck with the job." Last week I got a package from my hometown. Inside there was a $500 check with the following note. "First installment on what I owe you, not much, but it's a start." The amount was laughable in comparison to what had been taken from my trust, but I appreciated the gesture. Tyler had never taken responsibility for anything before. My mother still doesn't get it. Her latest email included the following line. "I don't understand why you're still punishing us when Tyler has clearly moved on." She does not realize that this was never about punishment. It was about accountability. She continues to send passive-aggressive emails. Last month she sent a lengthy message about how everyone makes mistakes and how genuine families forgive one another. I forwarded it to Mason, who responded with one gif of a man playing the world's smallest violin. My father appears to be gradually coming around. He began therapy and recently sent me an email acknowledging his role in enabling Tyler while neglecting me and Jenna. "I was a coward," he explained. "It was easier to give in to your mother and Tyler than to stand up for what was right. I failed you as a father, and I'm trying to be better." Jenna visits us in Atlanta every few months. She is now engaged and plans a destination wedding in Hawaii next year. She invited Tyler, but not our parents. Her decision, and I respect it. She and her fiancé, a pediatric surgeon she met at the hospital, are looking for houses in Atlanta. The thought of having my sister close by again feels like regaining something I lost years ago. My grandfather's inheritance has completely transformed our financial landscape. Rachel and I have established college funds for our future children and purchased a vacation property in the North Carolina mountains. We spend our money wisely on luxury cars and designer clothes, but having that financial cushion is a huge relief. Rachel and I are doing better than ever. The distance from my family's drama has been therapeutic for both of us. We're discussing starting a family soon, on our own terms, in our peaceful new life. Mason visits about once a month. He has a job that requires him to travel to the southeast on a regular basis, and he always makes time to crash at our place. He and Rachel get along well, owing to their shared enjoyment of teasing me. Last time he came over, he looked around our new house, nodded approvingly, and said, "You know what the best part about this place is? It's too far for your mother to stop by unexpectedly." He is not wrong. Sometimes I wonder how that insane proposal at Tyler's apartment triggered a chain of events that eventually led to everyone in my family confronting reality for the first time. My mother lost control. My father found his spine. Tyler got a dose of reality. And I finally stopped looking for approval from people who would never give it freely. It wasn't the path I had envisioned, but I'm finally free of the family drama.